Chapter 155. Xiao Su entered the drawing room and saw the pale-faced Xiao Ran sitting in the chair. He couldn't help but frown and scolded. "You're seriously injured. Instead of resting in the palace, you're running around. Are you tired of living?" Xiao Ran, who had been worried that his eldest brother would be angry at him, heard the long-awaited scolding. His eyes burned and he blurted out, "Eldest brother, this subject brother didn't deliberately not come out to clear your name. This subject brother couldn't help it. I'm really sorry." Seeing him blame himself and be hurt, Xiao Su sighed in his heart. "This matter has nothing to do with you. You don't have to blame yourself. Eldest brother, as princes, do we have to be forced to kill each other for that position?" Xiao Ran suddenly had the urge to pour out his heart. During this period of time, he had been lying in bed, his heart full of confusion and fear for the future. But he didn't know who to say it to. Only now did he find an outlet to pour it out. "Eldest brother, I'm afraid that in the end, I'll become the kind of person I hate." Xiao Su reached out to pat his shoulder and said sincerely, "Guard your heart. Then you can maintain your original heart." Xiao Ran's eyes reddened. But he knew that he was a man. A man didn't cry easily. So he could only endure it. This subject brother will remember eldest brother's teachings. "Go back. Don't make people worry," Xiao Su said lightly. Xiao Ran nodded. Before leaving, he turned his head and said, "I snuck out of the palace. I can't stay for too long. Eldest brother, help me say sorry to Qingyan." If it wasn't for him, Qingyan wouldn't have knelt for so many hours to plead for leniency. After Xiao Ran left, a pair of black gold boots appeared at the door. Her white eyebrows were slightly raised. "Your imperial father didn't hesitate to make things difficult for you because of him. His imperial mother is always against you. It's rare for you to treat him with such sincerity. It's rare for the imperial family to have such a kind heart." Hearing the pity in his imperial grandfather's words, Xiao Su calmly replied, "Grandson is just following his own heart. I can't be considered kind." TSK. "Grandpa, I didn't think that after going through so many things, you would still be so respectful and filial." The retired emperor walked into the hall, shaking his head as he spoke. His tone was somewhat incredulous, but he felt that it was reasonable. He still had some understanding of this imperial grandson of his. Isn't it all because of imperial grandfather's teachings? What's more, fourth imperial brother is also your imperial grandson. Xiao Su handed him a cup of tea and calmly retorted. The retired emperor suddenly widened his eyes. "Have you been with Yan for so long that you've also learned to contradict me?" Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his imperial grandfather's intermittent strangeness. He calmly said, "Qingyan is still young. There are some things that she didn't do well. Please forgive her, imperial grandfather. You haven't even married into the family, yet you're already siding with outsiders. Xiao Su, don't forget that I'm your grandfather." The retired emperor blew his beard and glared. Xiao Su smiled. "Grandson also didn't say that you weren't grandfather. Moreover, imperial grandfather, don't forget that this marriage was personally bestowed by you." The retired emperor was stunned. It was indeed bestowed by him. He suddenly felt like he had lifted a rock and smashed it on his own foot. The retired emperor stomped his feet in anger. Why did this good grandson's way of speaking change after being with Yan for a period of time? It didn't make sense. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to his imperial grandfather stomping his feet. He sat down and picked up the teacup in his hand. His thoughts drifted away. This trip was fraught with danger. How should he tell the little fellow to stay in the residence with peace of mind? No one responded to his monologue for a long time. The retired emperor gloomily glared at him. Then he found a comfortable position to sit down in. His tone also recovered its seriousness and became less frivolous. "What did your imperial father call you to the imperial study to talk to you about?" Xiao Su pulled back from his contemplation and faintly said, "Traces of ore were found in the Fuli mountain range. Imperial father asked grandson to investigate." Hearing this, the retired emperor frowned. "I've been the emperor for so many years. How come I didn't know that there were ores there? It was discovered recently. Grandson also didn't know." Xiao Su frowned, hiding the faint coldness in his eyes. The retired emperor couldn't figure it out, so he shook his head and continued to ask. It shouldn't be that simple. There should be additional tasks. Xiao nodded. He didn't speak bluntly and only praised. Imperial grandfather's guess is very accurate. The retired emperor sighed softly. At this time, he had a dignified aura that came from within. His eyes were sharp, and it was hard to imagine that the old urchin from before was him. How could I not understand my son? After so many years, he still hasn't changed. He's obstinate and doesn't listen to others. Forget it, forget it. One is my son and the other is my grandson. They can do whatever they want. I can't control them. I can't control them. The retired emperor had a helpless expression. Xiao stood up and bowed to appease him. Imperial grandfather, your son and grandson have their own fortune. You can relax and live the life you want. The retired emperor jumped up when he heard this. His beard trembled in anger. You dare say it like it's not you. I hope that when I return to the capital in the future, I won't have to collect your corpse. I won't play with you anymore. I'm going to find Huai Yuan. Humph. Xiao helplessly shook his head when he heard this. After a while, Huoling and Turin entered the study. They immediately saw their master standing in front of the window with his back to them. Master, are you really going to the Fuli mountain range? Huoling couldn't control his temper and took the lead to ask. Master had just stepped out of the imperial palace when the news came out. Water Spirit immediately passed the news to them when she received it. Master had just been released from prison, and His Majesty had sent him to the Fuli mountain range to find that ghost mine. From an outsider's point of view, they would think that Master was the mastermind behind the assassination. However, His Majesty saw that Master was a prince and couldn't bear to offend him. He found a reason to release Master. Moreover, right now was the time when the crown prince was being discussed. If Master was far away from the capital, wouldn't he not have a chance to compete? It's hard to disobey the imperial order. Xiao turned around and looked at his angry subordinate as he lightly spoke. This. Huoling opened his mouth. In the end, he gritted his teeth and lowered his head. Even Master couldn't disobey the imperial order. What right did they have to say anything? Turin raised his head to look at his cold master and asked in confusion. Master, according to Water Spirit's investigation, the Fuli mountain range stretches for thousands of li and is uninhabited. People have gone to investigate before, but they didn't find any traces of ore. Therefore, this subordinate is worried that this mission will be difficult to carry out. Everything depends on effort. Moreover, this mine search is only one of the missions. There are other secret orders. Go and prepare. In 3 days, we will set out. Xiao frowned as he spoke. His gaze was a bit complicated. Yes. Turin and Huoling responded. However, before they left, Turin turned around and asked hesitantly, Little Princess Consort still doesn't know about this. Should this subordinate inform her? Xiao turned to look outside the window at the bright red lanterns. After being absent-minded for a moment, he slowly said to his subordinate's worried expression, Go and do your work first. Ben Wang has other arrangements. Chapter 156. When there was no one left in the study, he walked back to his desk and sat down. He picked up a book and opened it, but he couldn't read the words. He still hadn't thought of how to tell her. He closed the book and revealed a bitter smile. Since when did he learn how to care about other people's feelings? Only Xiao never would have thought that there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. What should be known, would be known. It was only a matter of time. In the main courtyard, Chu Qingyan's heart was filled with joy. The big ice cube had returned safe and sound, so the large stone in her heart had finally fallen. Her parents had already returned to the Chu estate. This time, she cheerfully wanted to go to the study to find the big ice cube. However, after thinking about it, it was almost time for dinner. Perhaps he would return to the courtyard later. Thus, she slyly flew up to a large tree. The dense leaves hid her body, and below was the path to the courtyard. She didn't know if she would suddenly appear in front of the big ice cube later. Would he be startled? Just thinking about it made her excited. Although she subconsciously felt that she was becoming more and more like a child. Wasn't being happy the most important thing? She comforted herself. Very soon, someone came over. She immediately held her breath. Turin had taught her how to breathe, making it hard for others to notice her presence. This was the perfect time to use it. But when Chu Qingyan saw who it was, she felt a bit of regret. So it was Turin and Mu Ling. When she was hesitating about whether she should greet them or not, the two of them seemed to be arguing, so they finally stopped under her tree. Chu Qingyan was a little curious as she listened. Turin, why did you stop me just now? Hu Ling was a little annoyed. Turin disdained arguing with him. Master already told you that the imperial order is hard, and you still want to persuade Master not to go. It's better to not do this kind of useless thing. Go where? Chu Qingyan was a little confused hearing this. Turin, why do you think Master won't let the little princess know about this? Hu Ling leaned against the big tree and no longer argued with Turin. His tone was a bit discouraged, but he couldn't hide the doubt in his eyes. Turin rolled his eyes at him. It's not that Master doesn't want Xiao Wangfei to know. He's just thinking about how to tell her properly. Hu Ling nodded in agreement. That's right. Otherwise, if the little princess consort heard that Master wanted to keep her in the palace, she would probably overturn the king's palace. It's possible. Turin shook his head and laughed. The two of them smiled, but after they smiled, a kind of sadness filled their hearts. Why did His Majesty send Master away at this time? The fourth prince was still young. Was he planning to use these few years to nurture the fourth prince's power, and then wait for his master's return to contend against him? Just as the two of them were silent, a figure suddenly descended from the sky. What were you talking about? What do you mean by leaving? What do you mean by keeping me in the Fu? Chu Qingyan frowned, her face showing a calmness that did not match her age. Turin and Hu Ling looked at each other and didn't say anything. Chu Qingyan bit her lip. Do you think I won't know if you don't say it? At worst, I'll go ask His Highness. Seeing the little princess turn to leave, the two of them compromised and could only tell her everything. The more Chu Qingyan listened, the darker her face became. When she finally heard that the big ice cube had someone hide it from her, and was already preparing to leave, her face completely turned black. Hu Ling rarely saw the little princess' ugly expression, so he coughed lightly to wrap things up. That's how it is. I'll go find His Highness. Chu Qingyan threw down these words after hearing this and quickly walked towards the study. Hu Ling poked the person beside him. Say, do you think Master will? When he was leaning against the tree, he felt that there was someone hiding up there. Also, when he heard their conversation, he could guess who it was. So he gave a look to Turin, and the two of them continued talking. We've already done it. What's the point of worrying about it? Turin rolled his eyes at him. That's right. At worst, I'll just go to the torture room to receive my punishment. I just hope they don't hit me too hard, otherwise I'll have to ride a horse. Hu Ling smiled without caring at all. Turin also smiled when he heard this. Why did they want the little princess to know about this matter? Actually, they didn't understand it themselves. They just felt that with the little princess here, Master would at least live more like them. Chu Qingyan walked towards the study. Her mood went from being angry at being hidden to feeling like she was abandoned. Hearing Turin and Hu Ling's meaning, the big ice cube's mission this time was very difficult and the journey was long. He wouldn't be able to come back for at least 2-3 years, but the big ice cube didn't want to bring her along. He wanted her to stay in the palace, otherwise he would have already told her. When she walked to the door of the study, her anger had already slowly extinguished, and all that was left was sadness. Did the big ice cube think she would be a burden, so he didn't want to bring her along? She raised her hands, but before she reached the door, she hesitated and stopped. Was she placing too much importance on herself? Was it because she was given a bit of benefit that she wanted a yard after being given an inch? Did she overestimate herself by coming here to question him? However, her heart felt uncomfortable. If she didn't ask for a reason, she wouldn't be satisfied. Her hands used force, and the door to the study was pushed open. The sound was not small, and alarmed the person inside. Xiao Su looked up and saw her. When he was about to tell her to knock before entering, he saw her pursing her lips with an angry look on her face. He knit his brows. What happened? She stood at the door, not taking a step. She was afraid that if she moved, the courage in her heart would disappear. She looked up at him and slowly said, Big Ice Cube, Why didn't you tell me that you were going to the Fuli mountain range? You knew? He was a bit stunned. Yes, I knew. If I didn't accidentally hear this news, would you still hide it from me and then secretly leave? She became more and more excited as she spoke, so she didn't notice the pity that flashed in his eyes. This prince didn't plan to secretly leave. When the time is right, I will naturally tell you. Xiao Su sighed softly. He didn't expect that she would still find out. This time, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. With her temper, she wouldn't stop until she turned the world upside down. Time. Do I have to wait until the moment before you leave the Fu? She was so angry that she blurted out. It was rare for her to be so aggressive. Xiao Su frowned and looked at her sternly. Qingyan. Being scolded by the person in front of her, the last bit of courage in her heart gradually disappeared. Tears streamed down her face. Big ice cube. Do you not want me anymore? Grief, loss, loneliness, fear. The crying little fellow in front of him seemed to remind him of himself in the past. The sky was filled with fire, and the people around him fell one by one. He looked at the sky in despair. Do you all not want me anymore? When he came back to his senses, he was already hugging the sobbing little fellow. He looked down and saw her tightly clutching his sleeve, as if she was afraid that he would leave just like that. His heart was filled with pity. He was about to speak when he saw her raise her head and speak to him with teary eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cause trouble for you. I just don't want you to leave me alone. Chapter 157. All of her courage had lost to the inexplicable reluctance in her heart. She didn't care about anything else as she pulled on his sleeve and poured out her shameful thoughts. Time was the greatest magician. It always liked to draw a gap between people that would become bigger and bigger. In the beginning, the two of them could still look at each other, but in the end, they would be separated by the horizon. Once they parted, it would be 3 years and 5 years. If she couldn't follow him, after these years, the friendship that they had worked so hard to build would be slowly eroded by time. She didn't know why she had to follow him to the Fuli mountain range. Along the way, she had asked herself, but her heart didn't have an answer. It only told her that if she went, she would find the answer. If she didn't go, she would only regret it. So she had to grab onto him and not let him leave her alone. She had finally found someone she was willing to rely on and be with. Whether it was her big brother, her strict father, her close friend, or someone she cared about. She had spent a lot of effort, so how could she let him leave just like that? Xiao Su looked at the little fellow in front of him emotionally. She was like a little kitten that had put away all of her claws. With teary eyes, she pitifully hooked onto him and begged him not to abandon her. He had to admit that his heart was tangled up because of her sadness. He suddenly remembered that every time before he left, the generals under his command would always have a happy and helpless expression as they complained about his family's children crying and shouting to not let him leave. At the time, he didn't think much of it. Now that he was in the same situation, he finally understood this feeling. It was pain and satisfaction. Pain, the separation that was about to happen. He was satisfied with this hard-won and precious friendship. Xiao Su faced this pair of bright and watery eyes. The words of rejection were stuck in his chest, but he couldn't open his mouth. But when he thought about the road he was about to take, he couldn't let his heart soften. Qingyan, be good. This king will arrange a good path for you. He held on to her hand that was grabbing onto his sleeve, trying to convince her. Actually, at the same time he was convincing her, he was also convincing himself. If it was a normal day, she would have heard that there was something wrong with his words. Why did he want to arrange a path? Isn't the King of England's house the safest place? It wasn't until a long time later when she recalled the conversation that day that she finally realized that he had already seen through the schemes and had only wanted to give her a safe haven. She looked at him and slowly shook her head. Although tears blurred her eyes and she couldn't see the expression of the person in front of her, she still sobbed and said hoarsely, "Don't listen to me. If you listen to me, you won't want me anymore." Her firm tone was choked with sobs. His thin lips were pursed into a line. For the first time, he was helpless against someone. In the military camp, no one dared to disobey his orders. Those who had disagreed with him on the battlefield were no longer around. However, his military tactics were completely useless against the little guy in front of him. Neither beating nor scolding would work. A battle general of a generation, at this moment, was completely helpless against a person who had zero fighting strength. He softened his expression and tried to reason with her. You should stay in the house. When this king finishes his business, he will quickly return. Don't worry. I don't believe it, I don't believe it. They said that you won't be able to come back in 3 to 5 years. She shook her head. 3 to 5 years, you'll have grown up. How about this king come back and hold a banquet for you? He suddenly remembered that the little guy in front of him would have grown up by then. He didn't know if he could wait until then. His gaze slightly darkened. I don't want to. She shook her head. She didn't want to be separated. She didn't want to wait that long to see him again. What if you see a girl as old as me on the way back and feel pity for her, and keep her by your side? When you come back, wouldn't I not even have a place to stand? She continued to spout nonsense. Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This little guy's imagination was too rich. He smiled. You're already noisy enough. This king doesn't have the energy to deal with another one, so you have to believe this king. This king swears to the heavens. Chu Qingyan looked up at the sky. The moon was currently hanging high in the sky. She gave a cold snort. Don't you know that the moon is the most fickle? Every month, it's full or full. Also, do you know why vows are made up of word by word? That's because vows are discounted. You can only listen to half of it and believe half of it. Xiao was speechless. Why didn't he feel that this little guy usually had so many fallacious arguments? He pointed outside the door with a headache. He felt that this wasn't the time to talk about this. Calm down first. We'll talk about this tomorrow. He thought that most children were impulsive. After calming down for a night, they would probably change their minds. Chu Qingyan could guess what the ice cube was thinking when she heard this. She couldn't agree. She had to strike while the iron was hot. She had finally managed to move the ice cube, and after a night of cooling down, she wouldn't be able to move him anymore. She rolled her eyes and pretended to nod in agreement. Xiao was filled with doubt. Why was she so easily giving in? At this time, he saw the body in front of him tilt and fall to the side. He saw through her trick with a single glance. With a sigh, he grabbed her arm and pulled her back into his embrace. His voice was filled with helplessness and pampering that he didn't notice. What kind of crooked idea are you thinking of now? Nothing, it's just that my leg is numb and my wound hurts a bit. She innocently blinked. Then what about now? He raised his brows as he looked at the person in his embrace. There's no other way. My wound has worsened and I can't walk anymore. She shrugged. Xiao's eyes twitched. When did she learn to act so shamelessly? He had only spent 2 days in the imperial prison, not 2 years. But he quickly calmed down and curled his lips as he looked at her. You can't carry anything with your shoulders and arms. You're so soft when you're injured. How are you going to investigate the mines with this king? Chu Qingyan secretly cursed. She originally wanted to see if he would be soft-hearted and agree to her request, but how did he counterattack when she wasn't paying attention? She immediately struggled to get down and tidied up her sleeves. Then she looked up at him and said with sparkling eyes, I was just joking with you. My body is very good and you don't need to worry about it, so bring me along. Who knows, maybe you need to carry something heavy and I can even help you. Xiao looked at the thin and weak shoulders in front of him. Although she was much taller than when they first met, in his eyes, this girl was still a bit petite. Her eyes that had been washed by tears were like a mirror, reflecting the true emotions in her heart. Xiao saw that in her eyes he was feeling a bit of a headache. Seeing him in a daze, Chu Qingyan couldn't help walking forward to hug him. She didn't have the angry and sad questioning from before, nor did she act shamelessly like before. She only spoke in a soft voice. The King of England's palace is so big. Without you, without Hualing and the others, I will be lonely and scared. I just want to stay by your side. I will be very obedient and won't make a fuss. I won't cause trouble for you, alright? Chapter 158. Her voice was soft and coquettish. Xiao had to admit that at that moment, his heart seemed to have been hit by something. When he was young, he was the first prince. The people around him only flattered him and were cautious. The moment he put on his mask, everyone avoided him like the plague. Now his status had plummeted, and there were only a few people around him. No one had ever used such a determined and timid gaze to express their reluctance to part with him. Holding on to him without giving up, crying and saying that they were reluctant to part with him. It had nothing to do with benefits, no purpose, just wanting to stay by his side. At this moment, the wall made of ice and snow was open for her. We might have to sleep in the open during this journey. There won't be any luxurious food like in the Fu. He looked at her and said slowly. He didn't miss any reaction from her. Don't be afraid. I stayed in Mao village for so long. Didn't I go through the same thing? Chu Qingyan replied with a smile. If this was what Big Ice Cube was worried about, then there was no need. She wasn't a pampered young miss. She didn't need to be picky about what she ate. Xiao Su continued to ask. It might take more than 3 to 5 years. The journey will be difficult. It's not as easy as you think. Chu Qingyan looked at him. I'm not afraid of hardship. You don't need to worry about this. These weren't problems. She was a tough woman who could fix water pipes, change light bulbs, carry gas tanks and fix the ceiling, okay? The person in front of him didn't hesitate when she answered. It made his heart tremble slightly. Xiao Su pursed his thin lips and asked seriously. What if it's a road of no return? Are you willing to accompany this prince? Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes. No wonder Huiling and Turin were so worried. It turned out that this wasn't a good task. She shook her head without hesitation. I'm not afraid. Xiao Su sighed softly. In the end he compromised and pulled her into his arms. Remember what you said today. I won't forget. When he convinced her, he was also convincing himself. His reason told him that he couldn't take her with him. The journey was dangerous. He couldn't even protect himself, let alone her. But there was a voice in the depths of her heart that kept saying, take her away, take her away. In the end he still couldn't let go. Perhaps it was because no one could abandon the only light in their life. She had been missing warmth for too long, which was why she cherished it so much. He had never thought that the child he wanted to raise would become his only concern in Jingdo. You should have lived a carefree life, but in the end I missed this hard-won warmth too much. Because of my own selfishness, I took you away. In front of you, no matter if it's a wolf, a tiger, or a leopard, or a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, this king will protect you safely and happily. Big Ice Cube, so you agreed, right? Happiness came too quickly, and she couldn't react in time. Xiao Su pinched her nose in amusement and teased. You're so clingy that I can't get rid of you even if I wanted to. What a headache. Then I'm sorry. I'm afraid you'll continue to have a headache. Chu Qingyan smiled mischievously as the rock in her heart was lifted. She wasn't worried that the Big Ice Cube would go back on his words. As the commander of an army, he couldn't go back on his words. It's time to eat, let's go eat. Chu Qingyan held his hand and walked out of the study together. Sometimes Xiao Su didn't understand how he let her get closer to him step by step and become an indispensable part of him. Perhaps he was too indulgent. Perhaps he had been lonely for too long, and she brought the warmth of a lively atmosphere. So be it. When they reached the hall, the main seat was already occupied. They heard him grumble in dissatisfaction. Why are you all so slow? We're getting impatient from waiting. Xiao Su calmly sat down and said to retired emperor, You're an elder, there's no need to wait for us. Chu Qingyan sat down and winked at the Grand Imperial Sire. The Grand Imperial Sire dotes on us, and is worried that we won't have a share after we finish all the food. Don't you agree? Retired Emperor fumed and glared as he said, That's because we haven't had a full meal for a few days. Yen lass, don't find an opportunity to ridicule us after catching us once. Be careful that we don't spank you. Chu Qingyan stuck out her tongue. When retired Emperor picked up his chopsticks, the two of them picked up their chopsticks. After retired Emperor ate a piece of pork rib, he couldn't help but sigh ruefully. How long has it been since I've had such a meal? Outside it's all clear soup and tofu, steamed buns and pickled vegetables. We're full of pork ribs now. When Xiao Su heard that, he picked up a piece of braised pork and placed it in Imperial Grandfather's bowl. He said indifferently, It's you who gave up a good life and insisted on traveling the world. Retired emperor looked at the meat in his bowl and was a little surprised. This grandson of his had never picked up food for him before. Today's action made him feel flattered. He couldn't help but glance at Chu Qingyan. Perhaps this lass's appearance had indeed changed his grandson a lot. It wasn't in vain that he had used his most precious treasure to exchange for an opportunity for divination. When Xiao Su finished speaking, retired emperor rolled his eyes. What do you know? Roaming the world and riding a horse in Jianghu is truly enjoying life. Moreover, we don't want to stay in the capital and watch your imperial father do those stupid things. Although it's said that it's the father's fault for not teaching well, we've already taught him everything that needs to be taught. We don't know how that melon seed grows in that head. It's like a block of wood, not moving at all. Listening to retired emperor's nagging, Chu Qingyan bit her chopsticks and clicked her tongue. Was it appropriate for them to listen to these secrets? Thus, she asked the person beside her in a low voice. Let's sit here and listen to these things. Are you sure His Majesty won't? She made a throat-slitting gesture. Xiao Su glanced at her. It'll be fine once you get used to it. Also, eat properly. What kind of scandal is biting your chopsticks? Chu Qingyan silently lowered her head to eat. The big ice cube had turned on his strict father mode again. It was too scary. Retired emperor, who was singing a one-man show, saw that he couldn't get involved in the interaction between the two. He couldn't help but use his chopsticks to knock on the plate as he said in dissatisfaction. What? You two lovebirds think we're an eyesore? You don't respect your elders? Be careful that we don't tell your imperial father. Xiao Su leisurely ate his meal and leisurely replied to him. I wonder who was the one talking bad about him just now. Retired emperor choked. Also, don't knock on the plate when eating. Xiao Su added calmly. Retired emperor was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. Chu Qingyan lowered her head and stifled a laugh. TSK TSK TSK. It's fine if the big ice cube doesn't say anything, but once he does, he's going to choke me. In the end, they had a delightful dinner amidst retired emperor's jesting. Retired emperor burped and said to his grandson, Since you can't avoid the matter of Fuli mountain range, then go ahead and do it. Your imperial father is too stubborn. We don't want to lecture him anymore. You have to take care of yourself. Xiao Su nodded. After speaking, retired emperor pointed at Chu Qingyan. Yen lass, we have something to say to you. Chapter 159. Chu Qingyan was a little surprised. The Emperor Emeritus actually wanted to chat with her in private? It was simply too horrifying. She glanced at the large ice cube beside her and saw him nodding at her, indicating that she shouldn't be nervous. Thus, under the Emperor Emeritus's urging, she immediately followed him. When they reached a courtyard, the Emperor Emeritus stopped under a parasol tree and slowly turned around. His expression was different from his previous sloppy one, and it was slightly serious. Yen lass, do you know why this emperor called you here? Chu Qingyan was slightly stunned. Then she smiled and said, Imperial grandfather, how would Qingyan know? The Emperor Emeritus stroked his beard and looked at her with shrewd eyes. Don't tell me you don't have anything to ask about this emperor's bestowment of marriage? Chu Qingyan raised her brows, feeling that the person in front of her didn't treat her like a 10-year-old child. She also withdrew her pure and innocent smile and asked with curved lips, Then will you tell me? Smart people didn't need to beat around the bush when conversing with smart people. The Emperor Emeritus laughed heartily. Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. Yen lass, this emperor can only say that you can be at ease as your little princess consort. You will know what you need to know sooner or later. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. Wasn't that the same as not saying anything? Seeing her depressed expression, the Emperor Emeritus was extremely satisfied. The sullenness of these past few days had finally been relieved, but he wasn't a petty person who would only look for opportunities to take revenge. The Emperor Emeritus turned around with his back facing her with his hands behind his back. His tone was heavy. Yen lass, this emperor knows that you came from a different world, and that you don't belong to the Chu family. This Emperor Emeritus went against heaven's laws and brought you to Tianying continent in hopes that one day, you would be able to lend my grandson a hand. Chu Qingyan instantly froze in place. What? Her coming here was all because of the Emperor Emeritus's manipulation? She opened her mouth and had many questions in her heart, but she knew that he still had something to say. She also knew that no matter what she asked, he wouldn't tell her. In the end, she could only squint her eyes and wait for his next words. Going against heaven's will and changing fate wasn't purely for Su, but also for Xishuan. But as for the exact reason, I cannot tell you. I only hope that you can treat Su well. Ever since he was born, he has never received the happiness he deserved. I watched him grow up, but I was powerless to do anything about it. Such is his fate, he is destined to face more disasters than others. I have already left the imperial family and violated the heavenly Tao, so it is no longer appropriate for me to intervene in these matters. Therefore, the future will depend on the two of you alone. Happiness or sorrow, life or death, it is all up to you. The retired emperor said earnestly. When Chu Qingyan heard these words, she was somewhat astonished and somewhat in disbelief. If he hadn't said that he came from another world, she was afraid that she would have thought that the person in front of her was a swindler. Could it be that modern atheism and scientific notions of ghosts and gods were ineffective here? Defying the heavens and changing fate? What was that? What does it mean to be happy or sad? To live or die in a single thought? Was the retired emperor here to be funny? However, she could not bring herself to smile. What does it mean to give him a helping hand? She was just a rice worm who didn't know anything. The abilities that she had were not of much use in ancient times. Moreover, she did not believe that she could help Big Ice Cube with anything. Big Ice Cube was so powerful, and he had elite family generals in his hands that outsiders envied. Why would he need her? As if seeing through her doubts, the retired emperor smiled mysteriously. The current you is so stupid. Of course, you don't have any abilities, but it's hard to guarantee that you won't have any in the future. Although those two words sounded uncomfortable, she knew that this was not the time to fuss over it. Then what should I do and what shouldn't I do? She raised her head and asked with a serious face. Just follow your heart. The retired emperor turned around and replied word by word. Chu Qingyan was dumbfounded. Wasn't that the same as not saying anything? Just as she was about to ask more questions, the person in front of her changed his serious appearance and rubbed his chin with a gluttonous look. That's right, Yin lass, the pastry you made this morning was really good. Are there any others? This solitude wants to try them. Chu Qingyan withered in the wind. You can't play like this. But she knew that the other party had already said what he wanted to say. If she continued to ask, it would be meaningless if he didn't say anything. Although today's conversation threw a heavy bomb into her life, at least she already knew the reason why she suddenly transmigrated when she woke up from her sleep in the dressing room. Facing this main culprit, she couldn't get angry. At least he had already compensated her with precious family affection. But it was really a little mysterious. Forget it, since she was already here. She should just go and make some pastries for this old urchin who suddenly popped out. As for the rest, she would leave it to the heavens to arrange. Seeing that she obediently went to make pastries for him, the retired emperor stroked his beard in satisfaction. Adapting to the situation, crafty and wise, the person he chose would not be bad. It's just that he couldn't predict what would happen next. But he would wait and see. Returning to the courtyard, she saw Dabing sitting on the main seat. The faint yellow light from the fire gently draped over his body, reducing his coldness by a bit. The silver mask also lost a bit of its mystery. Dressed in a black robe, he had the leisure of a family member. Chu Qingyan was a little dazed. Most of the women in the capital were blind. What right did they have to say that her family's Dabing was horrifyingly ugly? Just this charm alone was enough to throw off those self-proclaimed elegant young masters by several streets. While she was angrily thinking, she couldn't help but walk in. Imperial grandfather finished talking to you? He put down the book in his hand and looked at her. And he said some things, but I didn't really understand. Indeed, some of the retired emperor's words sounded very mysterious, making it hard for her to accept. Or it could be said that she still didn't understand. Xiao Su laughed in spite of himself. No need to pay attention to it. He's probably bored to death and wanted to tease you. If only it was like this, then it would be good. But she faintly felt that things weren't that simple. At least, the retired emperor wouldn't summon her from the modern era for no reason. However, this old urchin's way of doing things was strange and unpredictable. Could it be that he was really bored and casually brought her over? If that was the case, then wouldn't she be too sullen? Xiao Su originally didn't care about the matter of imperial grandfather looking for her. But seeing that her expression wasn't right, he couldn't help but slightly frown. What did imperial grandfather say to you? She regained her senses and wanted to talk to him. But if she said something like transmigrating, De Bing would probably think that she was hot-headed and talking nonsense. So she blinked and said in a strange manner, Imperial grandfather said that I came for you. Chapter 160. When Xiao Su heard this, he laughed and shook his head. Imperial grandfather likes to make things up. If you believe it, you'll be stupid. Chu Qingyan nodded in agreement. Imperial grandfather did seem like a swindler, but her half-truth was still a bit believable. But the big ice cube clearly did not believe it. So she probed, Big Ice Cube, do you believe in reincarnating souls, traveling through time and space and changing fate? Xiao Su raised his brows. Are you messing around again? Chu Qingyan shrugged, feeling a bit defeated. This kind of thing did sound a bit shocking. Seeing her little face twisted, Xiao Su thought for a moment before saying, maybe there are things in this world that sound unimaginable. This prince is not sure, but I won't deny it. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan was a bit moved. Actually, the big ice cube said this to prevent her from being disappointed. AI, why did it feel like the big ice cube was becoming more and more human? It felt really inconceivable, but it also made her endlessly happy. Could it be that the battle to melt the big ice cube from before was having an effect now? The night was dark. The stars were bright and numerous, as if they were covered in sparkling gems. Chu Qingyan looked through the window, leisurely enjoying the tranquility of this moment. She finally let go of the worries she had for the big ice cube these days. Her entire person was calm and relaxed. Xiao Su looked at her increasingly beautiful side profile, and was very gratified. The little fellow was already slowly growing up. When he heard everyone's evaluation of her these days, he had a kind of illusion of glory. This was something he had never experienced even after winning a battle. It was a bit novel, but also a bit joyful. At this time the little fellow, who had only been quiet for a moment, turned her head and asked with a smile, when are we leaving to mine? Mine? Only she could think of that. Xiao Su muttered, we'll leave the day after tomorrow. Then there was still one day left. Chu Qingyan rubbed her head. She had to say goodbye to her parents and make arrangements for their following life. Time was a bit tight. Seeing the faint worry on her face, Xiao Su put down the book in his hand and beckoned to her. Come here. Chu Qingyan, who was deep in thought, instinctively approached him. What's wrong? Xiao Su looked at her seriously. If you regret it, it's not too late. Chu Qingyan was a little unconvinced. Big Ice Cube, I'm not the kind of person who goes back on her words and speaks without thinking, okay? I'm not regretting it. I just can't bear to part with my parents. Xiao Su didn't know why, but he felt relieved. He raised his hand and placed it on top of her head. His tone was indifferent as he said, have White Tiger arrange a suitable place to clean this prince's courtyard. Have him arrange for a few servants, then bring your parents in. The moment he finished speaking, he saw her widen her eyes and look at him in disbelief. He asked in confusion, what's wrong? Chu Qingyan shook her head. She blinked and looked him up and down before murmuring, Big Ice Cube, I find that you're getting more and more tactful. I thought that you wouldn't care about these miscellaneous matters. Is this prince that unbearable? Xiao Su pressed her head a little harder, until she grimaced. Then he released her in satisfaction, and resumed his noble and unapproachable attitude. Besides, this prince has dealt with quite a lot of the trouble you've caused. How can matters related to you be considered miscellaneous matters? Chu Qingyan was instantly overwhelmed by the favor. She rubbed her head and said hesitantly, then is it okay to bring father and mother out to live? Rather than worrying about whether they've been bullied, why not bring them under your wings and protect them well? Wouldn't that be more worry-free? Xiao Su said with raised brows. She had to admit that what the Big Ice Cube said was very reasonable, but she was a bit uncertain. Her wings were not fully grown yet. Could she really protect her father and mother? She always wanted to bring her father and mother out of the Chu family, but the reason she did not make a move was because she knew that she was not strong enough, and did not want her father and mother to suffer outside. The Chu family was worried about the big ice cube's face, so they did not dare move against her father and mother on the surface, but it was hard to guarantee that once they left the capital for the Fuli mountain range, the Chu family would not deliberately make things difficult for her father and mother. This was what she was worried about. Perhaps you don't have enough strength to protect the people you want to protect. Then before that, this king can temporarily borrow your strength. These calm words did not contain any pride or glory. It was as if he was simply stating a fact, but it filled her heart with gratitude. She already did not know what words to use to express the excitement and gratitude in her heart. The matter of your father and mother, I'll leave it to Hualing to take care of. Although he was leaving the capital, he had more than enough strength to protect these people. Chu Qingyan nodded again. Perhaps it would be a long time before she would know that everything the big ice cube did today was to set up a backup plan. He had expected the result, so he protected them ahead of time. But at that time, she did not know and enjoyed everything with a clear conscience. If she did not go with him, then she would have been one of those backup plans. But he never thought that she would be so stubborn to stay by his side. And she never thought that because she followed him without any hesitation, it would help the two of them resolve their dispute. Buddha said that for all things, if there was a cause, then there was an effect. If there was an effect, then there was a cause. It was not decided by fate, it was only decided by a person. We're leaving the day after tomorrow. Is there anyone the big ice cube wants to say goodbye to? She was going to explain the situation to her father and mother tomorrow, so they would not worry. She was also going to tell them about moving. At the same time, she remembered that although the big ice cube did not interact with anyone in the capital, and no one came to visit, there might be someone he wanted to say goodbye to. She couldn't help asking this out of curiosity. Say goodbye? A trace of confusion flashed through Xiao Su's eyes. Then, under the little fellow's unblinking gaze, he regained his train of thought. Yes, I'll go to the palace to see Imperial Mother tomorrow. Empress Liang? Chu Qingyan instantly dispelled the image in her mind of the thread in the hand of a kind mother, the clothes on a wanderer, the seams closed before leaving, the fear of returning late. She would never believe that Empress Liang would treat the big ice cube like this. I'll go with you. She leaned on the table and said with a smile. The sadness in his heart was dispelled by the words of the person in front of him. Xiao Su looked at her with a gentleness that he did not notice. He said in a teasing tone, "Don't you think the palace is a scourge? Why do you suddenly have the courage to go into the deep pool?" Was she as bad as the big ice cube said? She said righteously, "How can you catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? Anyway, I'll go with you." In the book of parenting, children were fickle. He deeply understood this point at this moment. Chu Qingyan saw that he did not respond, so she agreed. Every time the big ice cube entered the palace, something bad would happen. She was no longer willing to let him bear it alone. He protected her family's safety, so she did not want to see him sad. If he wanted her to stand up and accompany him, she would never back down. Chapter 161. The next morning, Chu Qingyan appeared in front of Xiao Su's door. Because he was going on a long journey, the Sichuan emperor had excused him from attending morning court. Xiao Su walked out of the room and saw the impatient little fellow. Last night, he promised to accompany her to buy things after leaving the palace. No wonder she was so impatient today. Ji Yunshu shook her head and said helplessly, "Let's go." Before she stepped out of the courtyard, Chu Qingyan almost missed her step. "Go early and come back early. Tonight, we want to eat soup dumplings, pan-fried dumplings, and bird's nest soup." Chu Qingyan looked back helplessly at the old urchin, who was waving his hands at her with all his might. She replied weakly, "Got it." Then she looked up and complained softly to the person beside her. "Imperial grandfather is a complete foodie." Xiao Su laughed in spite of himself. In the past, when Imperial grandfather was in charge of the Sichuan, he often forgot to eat and sleep. After passing the throne to Imperial father, he wandered the world. Delicious food also became a part of his life. Chu Qingyan nodded in understanding. That's why I'm saying that he doesn't want to miss out on things that he didn't seriously enjoy before. You can say that. She nodded and then smiled. Then tonight, I'll make a few more pastries that Imperial Grandfather hasn't eaten before. Xiaosu looked down at her. Aren't you afraid that Imperial Grandfather will blame you for this? She rubbed her head and smiled. If he wants to, then so be it. In any case, he's spending your money. Moreover, he's your grandfather. It's only right to be filial to him. I have no power and no talent, so I can only make small things to win his favor. Xiaosu's brows twitched slightly. He helped her into the carriage. You're already very good like this. In his eyes, her sincerity for him was already more important than those worldly possessions. The carriage soon arrived at the entrance of the palace. The two got off the carriage and smoothly arrived at Chaoyang Palace. Luo Yun was waiting at the entrance of the hall, as if she was not surprised to see His Highness. However, when her eyes fell on Chu Qingyan, her eyes flashed slightly, as if she did not expect to see her. Your Highness has suffered a lot during this period of time, Luo Yun said somewhat worriedly. Thank you for your concern, Aunt Luo. I wonder if Imperial Mother has gotten up? I'll have to trouble Aunt Luo to inform them. Xiaosu stood outside the hall with Chu Qingyan as he spoke to Luo Yun. Chu Qingyan shook her head in her heart. In front of outsiders, the big ice cube always had a kind of aura that kept people away. If it was like this, it was no wonder that the prince's residence was always cold and cheerless. No one came to visit. Those who wanted to get close were probably afraid of being frozen to death by the big ice cube's cold air. At this time, Luo Yun heard and showed a troubled expression. Your Highness, Her Highness the Empress has already ordered that the doors will be closed for the next few days. Please go back. Xiaosu's eyes flickered slightly, as if there was a flash of darkness in them. However, they quickly regained their clarity. Just as he was about to reply, the person beside him had already stepped forward and spoke to Luo Yun in a clear voice. Aunt Luo, His Highness will set out tomorrow. Today, I specially came to bid farewell to Her Highness the Empress. If Her Highness the Empress knows that His Highness is about to go on a long journey, she shouldn't refuse us at the door. I'll have to trouble Aunt Luo to go in and report. Chu Qingyan's face was full of smiles, and her words were reasonable. Even though Luo Yun had been in the palace for so long, she couldn't find a single mistake to refute. She looked at His Highness, and saw that he was also waiting for her reply. She couldn't help but grit her teeth and say, Your Highness, please wait a moment. This servant will go in and report. Seeing Luo Yun turn and enter the hall, the smile on Chu Qingyan's face slowly disappeared. Empress Liang, you really have the heart to refuse your own son at the door? Tomorrow he's going on a long journey. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's not even in the foreseeable future. You really have the heart to refuse even one meeting? She turned her head to look at the tall figure under the sunlight. Big Ice Cube, your heart, has it become ice cold again? She secretly clenched her fists that were hidden in her sleeves. She did not open her mouth to disturb the Big Ice Cube. At this moment, her gaze was fixed on the tightly shut palace door. She was both anticipating and worried that it would open again. Waiting was always the longest. Only a quarter of an hour had passed, but it made people feel like a season had passed. The doors creaked open and Luo Yun's figure appeared. Out of the corner of her eyes, she saw the Big Ice Cube's eyebrows move slightly. Chu Qingyan sighed softly. Although the Big Ice Cube was always cold and cheerless, as if he didn't feel anything around him, she knew that he cared. Blood was thicker than water. No one would be indifferent to their own family. Chu Qingyan stared at Luo Yun, but when she saw the expression on her face, she suddenly had a bad feeling. As expected. Your Highness, the Empress is not feeling well. It's not convenient for her to see you. Luo Yun looked at him with an awkward expression. No one saw Xiaosu's eyes suddenly darken. He nodded slightly. I'll have to trouble Aunt Luo. It's easy to get tired in the autumn. Please go to the Imperial Hospital to find a doctor to treat Imperial Mother, so that she can be cured as soon as possible. Luo Yun nodded and then continued. Your Highness, Master has a few words for this servant to pass on to you. There's no harm in saying it. Xiaosu looked up at the person on the steps and responded. The Empress said that this path was chosen by you and this consort has no right to interfere. Nearly 20 years of effort have been spent on you, but it's already been wasted. You aren't willing to bear the responsibility of the Liang family. You aren't willing to fulfill Imperial Mother's wishes. You haven't accepted the so-called wishful thinking of letting you grow stronger. Then, regardless of whether you live or die, whether you are rich or poor, I hope that you will take care of yourself. This consort will no longer interfere, and the Liang family will no longer help you. Luo Yun finished speaking in one breath, but her eyes didn't dare to look down the steps at His Highness who was emitting an icy aura. Chu Qingyan listened to these words angrily. What did she mean by this path was chosen by herself? Wasn't it difficult to follow imperial orders? What did she mean by all her effort being wasted? May I ask if you cared about your son before? Do you know what he likes and hates the most? What did she mean by wishful thinking of letting him grow and not accepting it? Do you know what he needs the most? He doesn't need anything. He's already strong enough. He only needs the warmth of his loved ones. If you aren't even willing to give him such a humble wish, do you still deserve to be called a mother? When he was helpless, lonely, and wandering, you cut off his path of retreat because of everything that happened before. Empress, are you really worthy of the word mother? Chu Qingyan clenched her fists, her veins popping. She wasn't willing to remain silent. Just as she was about to open her mouth to berate, her wrist was grabbed by a strong force. She turned her head to look at the person beside her in surprise. He replied without any emotion. Please tell my Imperial Mother. I will remember Imperial Mother's teachings. Please take care of Imperial Mother's body while I am not here. I will withdraw. Chu Qingyan bit her lip and swallowed the words that were about to burst out, as well as the raging flames of anger. She forced herself to lower her head and no longer look at those three golden words. Chaoyang Palace? Why couldn't she feel the warmth of the sun and wind? She only felt an eerie chill. Big Ice Cube, how can you not make my heart ache? Chapter 162. Holding her wrist, he turned around and led her away step by step. Your Highness, please take care. Luo Yun's voice was choked with sobs as she knelt down behind him. Chu Qingyan did not turn around. She was afraid that if she did, she would not be able to resist the urge to rush up and push open the door. She would fiercely ask the person inside if she was still her mother. Her wrist slipped out of his slender fingers and turned to hold his hand. She knew that words at this time would have no effect on the big ice cube. She chose to use silent companionship to dispel the haze in his heart. 9 years ago, this king left the palace to gain experience. The doors of Chaoyang Palace were also tightly closed. 7 years ago, I left the palace to fight. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, Imperial Mother did not want to see me. In her eyes, only by gaining Imperial Father's favor and making contributions to the court can one stand firm. However, this king was not willing. The capital is too suffocating. Step by step, he slowly walked, but his heart was covered with dark clouds, making it hard for him to breathe. He didn't know if it was because the hand in his palm was too warm or because the person accompanying him made him feel at ease, but he suddenly had the urge to talk. Chu Qingyan did not think that he would suddenly open his mouth, but when she heard him slowly talk about his matters, his tone as if it was not important, her eyes slowly became warm and wet. I don't think there's anything wrong with gaining experience and fighting. Read 10,000 books and travel 10,000 li. If you don't go out and see things when you encounter something in the future, you will only use military force on paper. Moreover, a man who makes contributions is always more attractive than those who scrupulously abide by their duties, right? She tried to use a playful tone to say these words, trying to cheer him up. Xiao Su faintly smiled when he heard this, but the darkness in his eyes did not dissipate for a long time. Chu Qingyan saw this and her heart hurt a little, but she didn't know how to comfort him. After all, the knot in his heart for nearly 20 years was not something that could be untied in a day. It was like a disease, but she was not afraid to spend time to help him untie it and dispel the coldness in his heart, because what she did not lack the most right now was time. Big Ice Cube, I don't plan on buying anything. When the time comes, I'll list everything on a piece of paper and have Steward buy it for me. She felt that the big ice cube right now was not suitable for the bustling streets. The loneliness in his heart and the bustling streets would create a sharp contrast. Xiao did not ask why she suddenly changed her mind. He just nodded and brought her into the carriage. Big ice cube to mine, where do we go? Sitting in the carriage, Chu Qingyan, trying her best to find a topic to distract him. Xiao only smiled at her insistence on calling this trip a mining trip. Suddenly, he was in the mood to explain these things to her, as a way to prepare her mentally. Our current location is in the southeast of Xixian, and the Fuli Mountains are in the northwest. Therefore, we have to pass through the entire Xixian country to reach it. We have to pass through the Jiangzhi region, the Jiangnan River, the Mali River, the low-lying basin, the Fujing Mountains, the Hutting Desert, and finally pass through the Chengling Forest to reach the Fuli Mountains. Cross Sichuan. Water, basin, mountain, desert, and forest. Chu Qingyan's face was full of black lines. It seemed that this trip was really long. So she began to carefully think about what to bring. Where there is water, we should bring enough rain gear because it is easy to encounter rainy days. In the desert, we should pay attention to the situation where there is no water. We must bring a water bottle. In the forest, there are many mosquitoes, snakes, and ants. Mosquito nets and herbs are indispensable. Xiao leaned on the soft couch and saw the person beside him counting with her fingers. He could not help but laugh and shake his head. But the little fellow was still beyond his expectations. She was not frightened by the facts he said. Instead, she began to think about what to prepare next. Along the way, listening to the little fellow's nagging, Xiao suddenly felt that when he was alone, he did not feel lonely. But now when two people were together, he felt that it was good to be lively. At this time, the little fellow raised her head and asked with some confusion, "If we don't see any villages or shops on the road, should we prepare some dry food?" Xiao heard and nodded. Usually we prepare some dry steamed buns, sesame seed cakes, and the like. Chu Qingyan could not help but shake her head. Dry steamed buns, sesame seed cakes, and the like were vegetarian. She had to think about what could be light enough to carry and eat to fill the stomach. Chu Qingyan thought, and had already returned to the King of England's residence. As soon as she entered the residence, she saw her father squatting on the ground and counting ants. "Father, why are you here?" She originally thought that she would have to go to the Chu residence, but she did not expect that her father had already appeared in the King of England's residence. Chu Qingyan's heart surged with joy. Hearing the sound, Father Chu jumped up and waved his hand at the two people, then quickly went over. Chu Qingyan originally thought that her father was looking for her, but unexpectedly, her father quickly passed by her and walked in front of the big ice block. He stroked his beard and said, "Son-in-law, I heard that you are going on a long journey. The journey is long. You have to pay attention to your own safety." Chu Qingyan suddenly felt a gust of cold wind pass by her side. "Don't be like this, okay? Father, can you take a good look at who is your real daughter?" Father Chu did not notice his daughter's hurt expression at all, and continued to ask her all sorts of questions in high spirits. For example, remember to bring a quilt. Remember to bring good food when it is cold at night. Remember to bring money when you are hungry on the road. Remember to bring money to buy things. In any case, it was all very miscellaneous things. But she did not know why, but she felt very warm as she listened to him. Xiao, who was supposed to be impatient, didn't know when, but he started to listen to Father Chu's long-winded and nonsensical words. He didn't feel annoyed at all. Perhaps he had never experienced familial affection, but at this moment, it was slowly flowing by his side. "Father, you not only have the big ice block, you also have a daughter, okay? Don't forget your daughter when you have a son-in-law, okay?" Chu Qingyan pretended to be jealous as she held her father's hand and muttered unhappily. When Father Chu heard this, he glared at her as if he did not have the leisure to pay attention to her. "Kai, you are so stupid. You are together with the big ice block. If he takes good care of himself, isn't that the same as taking good care of you? All right, you are already an adult. What are you getting jealous for?" Chu Qingyan felt that her father's fallacious reasoning was somewhat reasonable, but it could not hide the fact that he was very biased. However, she could clearly feel that the coldness from the depths of the palace was slowly dissipating from the big ice block. This was good too. "Your Highness, Kai Yuanlang, you are back." Mother Chu came out of the courtyard and greeted the three with a smile when she saw them. The wind after autumn was a little cold, but the air that lingered between the four of them seemed to carry the warmth of a spring breeze. She did not know if there would be a chance in the future, but she would remember this moment. Xiao Su frowned, his heart filled with endless disappointment. Chapter 163. Your Highness, this concubine went to the temple to ask for these 2 amulets for you. They've already been consecrated and will protect you on your journey. After eating together, Chu Mu's mother took out 2 red amulets and said to Xiao Su with some hesitation. After all, she had asked for them on her own initiative. Xiao Su was the prince of a country, and his status wasn't ordinary. She was worried that he wouldn't accept them. Thank you, Madam Chu. Xiao Su took them without hesitation and put them in his sleeve. Even Chu Qingyan, who understood him well, couldn't help but be stunned by his smooth movements. The Emperor Emeritus bit his chopsticks and looked at this scene in disbelief. Why did his grandson, who had never accepted benefits from others, suddenly have such a change in temperament? Chu Mu's mother also didn't expect this, but when she saw that one of the amulets in her hand was gone, she couldn't help but feel relieved. His Royal Highness wasn't as unreasonable as the rumors said. Chu Qingyan saw that her mother was stunned in place, and couldn't help but reach out to take the other amulet from her. She smiled and said, "Mother, you're so nice. I was just lacking one. In the future, when I see an amulet on the road, I'll think of father and mother. I also have a parting gift for you. I also have one." Chu Mu's father impatiently took out 2 small knives that had been sharpened and handed them to the 2 of them, as if he was asking for praise. "Look, this is a dagger. I learned it from Blockhead and put a lot of effort into it. You can put it on your body to protect yourself." Chu Qingyan clicked her tongue. The blades looked so sharp, she didn't know how father hid them on his body. She was about to reach out to take them, but a pair of hands beat her to it. She looked suspiciously at Big Ice Cube putting the daggers in his sleeve. Could it be that he wanted to help her keep them? Xiao Su thought to himself. The blades were so sharp, it was better to let Mu Ling make 2 scabbards that fit. Otherwise, with the little fellow's careless temperament, it might hurt him. The Emperor Emeritus almost bit his chopsticks in half. When did his grandson accept gifts so readily? He was practically blinded. But in his heart he felt that this was a good thing. At the very least, those who were previously unreachable and floating in the air had now fallen into the mortal world. They were slowly experiencing the mortal world, and were no longer so distant. However, the Emperor Emeritus still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. How could these 2 outsiders be more diligent than him, their biological grandfather? However, to be honest, he really didn't prepare anything good, so he could only say dryly, "Well, Su'er Yen, when you set off the day after tomorrow, remember to call me." "What for?" Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and asked. "I'm going the same way as you. Let's go together." The retired emperor coughed lightly. He couldn't just say that he was hitching a ride. Xiao Su looked at him with understanding, but he didn't say anything, which meant that he agreed. Chu Qingyan scratched her head in confusion. Didn't retired emperor say that he was going to visit his friends in the West? Why is it on the way again? She saw the Emperor Emeritus put down his bowl and chopsticks. Before he left, he instructed, "Yen, prepare more pastries in the next 2 days and bring them along." Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. It turned out that the Emperor Emeritus wasn't going the same way, but had taken a fancy to the pastries she made. After the meal, Chu Qingyan took her parents downstairs, while Xiao Su slowly walked to the door of the study. At this time, there was already someone waiting there. Ethereal, who was dressed in white, was dressed casually. "What's the matter?" Xiao Su's mood was relaxed at this time, and his voice also carried a trace of elegance. Ethereal was slightly surprised. Every time he left the capital, His Highness's mood was always very low. Why was it different this time? However, this kind of change was always good. He bowed slightly and said, "Lord, this subordinate has already found out that my junior sister has been moving around the Jiangxia region in recent years. Although her whereabouts aren't very clear, at least we can lock onto a small area. We don't have to search blindly like in the past." Xiao Su nodded. "You can leave this matter to Water Spirit. When we find her, We can have her bring her to the capital to treat First Master Chu's illness. Ethereal shook his head, his face carrying a trace of reluctance. Lord, I'm afraid this won't work. Why? Xiao Su couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. This subordinate of his had been by his side for many years, and his behavior had always been careless. He had never shown a difficult expression on a matter, so he couldn't help but be curious. He wasn't a cold-hearted master. Although he didn't ask about his subordinate's private affairs, it didn't mean that he didn't care. Seeing that his lord had already asked, Ethereal smiled embarrassedly. This subordinate and my junior sister have some misunderstandings. This misunderstanding hasn't been resolved for many years. In addition, because of this subordinate, she has a deep misunderstanding of the Sichuan royal family. If she knew that you sent someone to treat her illness, she would definitely close the door and refuse to accept. Xiao Su understood something. It seemed that he and that junior sister had a deep relationship. This time we'll pass by the Jiangxia region on our mining trip, so this subordinate wants to take this opportunity to visit her in person. I hope that she will agree to treat me for my sake. If she can resolve the misunderstanding from back then, that would be even better. Ethereal slowly expressed his thoughts. In fact, he wasn't confident in his heart. His junior sister had been drifting around the world for many years to avoid him. This time, if there was an opportunity, he would personally pay her a visit. Xiao Su remembered that 10 years ago, he was the one who sent Ethereal to study medicine under divine Dr. Luo. It wasn't until 6 years ago that Ethereal returned to his side after completing his studies. He wasn't very clear about what happened in those 4 years. Ethereal also kept his mouth shut. He felt that in those few years, Ethereal had matured from being young and inexperienced to being able to take charge of things on his own. It was just that he was more indifferent to everything around him than before. All right. He had always trusted his subordinates. Without asking for the reason, he agreed. Ethereal was a little touched. Actually, his master could directly send someone to forcefully invite him back to the capital. However, his master didn't do so. Instead, he chose the worst method for his sake. At this moment, Ethereal saw the young princess Consort walking over from the corner. He bowed slightly towards her before bidding farewell to his master. This subordinate will go and prepare the medicine for the trip. Xiao Su nodded. At the same time, Chu Qingyan's voice sounded. Big Ice Cube, I've been looking for you for a long time. So you're here. Xiao Su turned around and looked at the person who was like a butterfly jumping in the sunlight. He asked softly, what's the matter? I want to send father and mother back to the Chu residence. Although Steward Bai has already started to select the courtyard and arrange for manpower, I'm worried that if we're not there, something will happen to the Chu residence. So I want to personally make a trip. Chu Qingyan scratched her head in annoyance. As the saying goes, the mountain is high and the emperor is far away. If they leave, it will take a long time before they can return. So she must solve this hidden danger of the Chu family. Ben Wang will accompany you, Xiao Su casually said. What? Chu Qingyan felt that she heard wrongly. Why are you still standing there in a daze? Let's go. Xiao Su had already started walking towards the courtyard. Chu Qingyan raised her head to look at the sky. The sun didn't rise from the west today. Hey Big Ice Cube, slow down. Wait for me. Chapter 164. Although she didn't understand why Big Ice Block would suddenly want to go to the Chu Manor with them, Chu Qingyan didn't ask too much about it. Otherwise, Big Ice Block finally wanted to relax. If he went back on his word after being asked, wouldn't that be a loss? Once Big Ice Block left, Gu Rong and Gu Yi also followed. She remembered that when she first saw Big Ice Block in the Chu Manor, he was accompanied by these two twins. At that time, she couldn't tell which one was which, but now she could. The smiling face was Hu Rong, while the gloomy face was Gu Yi. Although the two of them weren't very satisfied with her at that time, because of Big Ice Block's intentional or unintentional protection of her and Hua Ling, and the other special treatment of her, Gu Rong and Gu Yi didn't reject her as obviously as before. However, they also didn't get close to her. At most, they would greet her when they met and didn't say anything else. After all, the two of them had been beaten because of her, so it was normal for them to dislike her. She didn't need to try to change other people's opinion of her. After all, some things were innate. If others didn't like her, she couldn't do anything about it. Because they were about to leave, and their parents wouldn't come out to send them off tomorrow. It would be a long time before they could see each other again. So Chu Qingyan and her parents rode in the same carriage, while Xiao Su rode in his own carriage. The Chu manor and the King of England's manor were separated by some distance. By the time they arrived, an hour had already passed. Father Chu and Mother Chu got out of the carriage first, and Chu Qingyan landed after them. She looked up at the Chu manor's gate. Because she was granted a marriage, the Sichuan emperor rewarded the Chu family with a lot of money. The Chu family pocketed all the money and couldn't wait to renovate the Chu manor. By the time they came back, the money had already been spent. So this Chu manor could be said to have a golden exterior and a rotten interior. On the surface, it looked magnificent, but the inside had already been hollowed out. The two manservants who were originally standing by the door turned a blind eye to the person who alighted from the carriage. Suddenly, they saw Chu Qingyan alighting from the carriage. Their arrogant faces disappeared, and they immediately bowed politely. "Ninth young lady Chu has returned to the Fu. Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling." Chu Qingyan sighed. What a classic example of a monk. At this moment, Xiao Su also got down from the carriage and slowly walked over. The manservant had never seen him before, but when he saw him get down from the carriage of the King of England's mansion with a mask on his face, a chill ran down his spine and he knelt down with a plop. "His Royal Highness." Chu Qingyan shrugged her shoulders at Xiao Su. It seemed that his reputation was still the best. Xiao Su disapprovingly took the lead and stepped into the mansion. Chu Qingyan followed closely behind with her parents. When Old Master Chu and the others learned that His Royal Highness had arrived, they immediately gathered everyone to wait in the front courtyard. When Chu Qingyan stepped into the courtyard, she was shocked by the people in the courtyard. Apart from Old Master Chu's birthday, she had never seen such a neat family again. "His Royal Highness has graced us with his presence. Please take a seat." Old Master Chu's wrinkled face was about to burst into a smile. The others immediately stepped forward to chime in. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. In the modern world, everything depended on one's appearance. Now that they were in ancient times, everything depended on one's power. If it were her parents who came back, these people's attitudes would probably be disdainful. Xiao Su did not decline, and sat down in the main seat. Chu Qingyan walked to his side and stood upright. She wanted to see what the big ice cube's purpose was. Otherwise, with his personality that did not like to socialize, he would not have such a reaction. The seats were arranged according to the order of seniority. Old Master Chu and Old Madam Chu, her parents, second Old Master Chu and his wife, third Old Master Chu and his wife, fourth Old Master Chu and his wife, and on the other side were Chu Dekhang and a few other youths. "May I know why His Royal Highness has suddenly graced us with his presence?" Madam Xing was a shrewd person, and she was also good at social interactions. After the servant girls served tea, she covered her mouth with a handkerchief and giggled. As soon as Madam Xing finished speaking, everyone's gazes seemed to focus on the person in the main seat. The King of England's reputation for ruthlessness was well known, and no one dared to stare at him so openly. Moreover, the masked King of England inexplicably made people feel that he was somewhat ferocious. The youths did not even dare to raise their heads. Chu Qingyan saw everyone's reaction, and only felt that it was a little ridiculous. She did not need to explain her family's big ice cube's good points to unimportant people. "Qingyan, about the matter of your parents' migration, you say it." Xiao Su only said this one sentence and leaned back in his chair, as if he was handing over everything to her. When everyone heard this, they were somewhat puzzled and could only turn their gazes to Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan was stunned, but she quickly took over the topic. "Granduncle, aunts, uncles, aunts, I am indebted to everyone for taking care of my parents over the past few days. Now that Qingyan has found a place for my parents to settle down, there is no need to disturb the residents in the future." When old Madam Chu heard this, she was unhappy. With the eldest son and eldest daughter-in-law of the Chu family in the residence, even if Xiao Su was not favored now, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. They could still get some benefits. If the two of them moved away now, wouldn't they lose 2 money trees for nothing? Ever since Xiao Su and the Chu family became in-laws, those high-ranking officials and nobles had sent many gifts to the Chu family. In fact, it was to establish a good relationship with them, and their Chu family was also prestigious outside. After all, they had a granddaughter and a niece who was a princess consort of the royal family. Even if they committed a crime, outsiders would still give them some face. Therefore, the Chu family took advantage of this relationship. Although they did not deprive father and mother Chu of food and clothing, it was not considered good. Thus, old Madame Chu pretended to be surprised and said, "Are you dissatisfied with the Chu family's lack of food and clothing, so you want to set up another residence?" When old Madame Chu said this, everyone looked over with disapproving gazes. And Madame Xing also asked father and mother Chu hypocritically, "Are our Chu family not treating eldest brother and sister-in-law well? If there is anything that is not considerate, I hope that eldest brother and sister-in-law can point it out. We will definitely correct it." These words were said with extreme grievance, as if it was her parents who were picky and made them compromise. And Madame Wang also nodded and said, "Eldest brother and sister-in-law, if you have something to say, just say it. We are all one family, there is no need to be so polite." Those who spoke were all women, and those men did not interrupt and just watched from the sidelines. In any case, there was nothing that could not be done with these women speaking. Chu Qingyan saw through their tricks at a glance. She couldn't help but snort coldly. These people's skin was thicker than the city walls. They were wearing the most popular clothes on the market, while her parents' clothes were not new. They really had the nerve to say that. Say what you want to say. This prince is here. Suddenly, such a sentence came from the side. Chu Qingyan suddenly realized that the big ice cube was here to support her. Fine. Who's afraid of a fox exploiting the tiger's might? Chapter 165. Ant, as well as the other ants, Qingyan doesn't have any other intentions. I just feel that my parents like peace and quiet, and the Chu family has too many mouths, so it's inevitable that they'll feel uncomfortable. That's why I had the idea of moving out. Chu Qingyan said bluntly. She had already seen their attitude towards her parents just now. Other than the food and accommodation, it was really annoying in other aspects. Too many mouths. Qingyan, what do you mean by that? Are you implying that we're harsh on your parents? Madame Wang couldn't hold back, and said in a rather unhappy tone. Qingyan didn't mean that. Chu Qingyan was too lazy to argue with her. Chu Qingyan stood naturally and gracefully in the hall, elegant and beautiful, like a flower that was about to bloom. The several young ladies present suddenly discovered that in just a few months, Chu Qingyan had become more and more like water spirit, and she had also grown taller. Compared to when she first came to the capital, she was simply too different. The few young ladies began to feel jealous in their hearts, but on second thought, Xiao Su was just a wasted prince who was no longer useful, so their hearts immediately calmed down. In fact, people's jealousy was like this. When envious of someone, they would speculate on the dark side of selfishness, and then inexplicably make a lot of bad conjectures. And then their heart would be satisfied. Look, you're just a so-so. Confucius said, the old one is the old one, the old one is the old one, the young one is the young one. Ninth sister, you have to treat your elders like a junior, otherwise you will be criticized. The bookworm Chu Qingyan stood up and lectured her with the attitude of an elder brother. Confucius also said, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. You have fish and meat, but my parents are like tofu and soup. I don't know where your so-called kindness to my parents comes from. Chu Qingyan didn't care about falling out with them. In any case, the big ice cube had spoken, so she didn't mind falling out with them. Confucius said. Chu Qingyan continued to talk about Kong Ziyun, but Chu Qingyan had already impatiently interrupted him. Don't always talk about Confucius. He doesn't have so much time to care so much about your trivial matters. You'd better read your books honestly. Don't always shake your head. Otherwise you'll really become a pedantic bookworm. Chu Qingyan hated the most that he always looked like a saint, opening and closing his mouth saying that Confucius was righteous and Meng was righteous and self-righteous. He had always been the pride of the family, but he was taught a lesson by his sister who was several years younger than him. Chu Qingyan was so angry that his face turned red. However, he who boasted of his good manners couldn't curse like a woman in the street. He could only say angrily, Confucius said that only women and villains are difficult to raise. Same here. Don't forget, the one who gave birth to you and raised you was also a woman. Chu Qingyan retorted effortlessly. Chu Qianan was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He flung his sleeves and sat down. Seeing her son being scolded so harshly, Madame Wang saw out of the corner of her eye that Madame Xing was secretly laughing. She felt uncomfortable and stood up, saying to Xiao Su with an aggrieved expression, His Royal Highness, look at Qingyan's young age, but her temper is quite bad. Today, she dared to disobey her elders and elder brother in front of you. If this continues, who knows what will happen in the future? She was implying that if she dared to act so recklessly today, she would dare to expose the roof tomorrow and scold her. Madame Xing thought that her sowing discord would work, but she was wrong. If it weren't for Chu Qingyan's face, Xiao Su wouldn't even take a step into the Chu estate. Now, it was even more impossible for Xiao Su to scold Chu Qingyan. Does Madame Xing have a problem with this prince's pampering? Xiao Su said indifferently, not even giving her a glance. Madame Xing choked and didn't know what to say. Her face had already turned red. Only then did the rest of the people realize that Chu Qingyan already had His Royal Highness as her backing. If they relied on Chu Qingyan, wouldn't it be the same as leaning against a big tree to enjoy the shade? Just as this thought formed in their minds, Chu Qingyan spoke. Since no one has any problem with this, then this matter is settled. Matriarch Chu immediately tried to stop her. Her usually sharp and unkind face was now trying her best to pretend to be kind and amiable. However, because she always kept a straight face, when she smiled, it was 30% ferocious and 60% frightening. Not only Chu Qingyan, but everyone else also could not bear to watch and turned their faces away. Ninth girl, don't treat Aunt as an outsider. We're all one family, so why should we live the lives of two families? If you're worried that your parents will be wronged, Aunt can promise you that as long as Aunt is here, I won't let your parents be bullied. Chu Qingyan sneered in her heart. If it weren't for you, the mistress of the household, leading the way, how could father and mother be in such a situation in the Chu family? Thank you, Auntie, for your kind intentions. Qingyan thanks you. Chu Qingyan's face was still filled with rejection. Chu Zhiming stood up angrily, but he didn't dare to point at Chu Qingyan. He turned to Father Chu and said angrily, Eldest brother, don't be ungrateful. If it weren't for the Chu family, would you have the status you have today? Raising rats to bite a cloth bag, it's talking about people like you. Father Chu looked at him strangely. I didn't see you raising rats, and Xiaohua didn't bite your rats either. Chu Zhiming was a little regretful. He shouldn't have picked on the soft persimmon. Instead, he was splashed with juice. However, Chu Qingyan had already been angered. She would never let off those who bullied her parents. Since they had already made it so clear, she didn't want to give them any face. Second Uncle Tang, you've misunderstood. If it weren't for my father's heroic deeds, would the Chu family have this mansion to shelter them from the wind and rain? 10 years ago, you chased my parents out of the Chu family without any explanation. Have you ever thought about how to write the words repay kindness with enmity? During this period of time, when I entered the prince's mansion, you received many congratulatory gifts. You secretly embezzled them into the treasury, and didn't treat my parents well. If it weren't for my financial support, what would they be like now? Have you ever thought about how to write the words repay kindness with enmity? Chu Qingyan spoke unhurriedly, pausing between each word. Her gaze swept over the people present. They didn't dare to raise their heads to meet those clear eyes. The Chu patriarch and his wife were so angry that their faces flushed red, but they couldn't say a word. After all, what she said was the truth. However, they weren't ashamed. They felt that Chu Qingyan had a sharp tongue, and couldn't be used by them anymore. They were annoyed in their hearts. After coldly watching the little fellow fight with this outrageous family, Xiao Su stood up with satisfaction. He then said to Gu Rong and Gu Yi, There's no time like the present. Let's move out today. The matter of moving out was settled. The Chu family didn't dare to say another word. Xiao Su swept his gaze over the people present and said coldly, This prince doesn't want anyone to disturb this prince's father-in-law and mother-in-law in the future, so, his gaze was slightly suppressed. Everyone bowed their heads and didn't dare to breathe loudly. Chu Qingyan didn't pay attention to the words father-in-law and mother-in-law. She was overjoyed. The big ice cube's aura on the battlefield wasn't just for show. Only Father Chu's eyes flashed slightly. Chapter 166. Leaving the Chu manor, Chu Qingyan thought of those people holding back their anger and not daring to say anything. Her heart filled with joy. Big ice block, you were so handsome just now. Chu Qingyan praised from the bottom of her heart. Xiao Su's expression was calm, but he was feeling a bit proud inside. Ever since he found out that she was not referring to the highest-ranking commander in the army when she said handsome, but rather describing how handsome he was very happy to hear her describe him like this. If you want the Chu family to return your residence, this king will give it to Hualing. Xiao Su looked at her sparkling eyes and said in a low voice with a bit of gentleness. Unexpectedly, she shook her head. Right now you're in the eye of the storm and you're about to go on a long journey. I don't want you to be misunderstood because of this matter. If those people hiding in the shadows maliciously slander you for using your power to steal someone else's residence, I'm afraid those people who don't know the truth will misunderstand you again. This was something she did not want to see. This was also the reason why she had not made a move against the Chu family yet. It was because her current identity was the future king of England's princess consort. Every action represented the attitude of the big ice block, so if she insisted on seeking justice, she was afraid that the big ice block would be unjust. She was not willing to do this. She wanted to wait until the time was right to take it all back bit by bit. Xiao Su never thought that she was worried about him. In the cold imperial family, it had been a long time since he had been cherished by someone. His heart softened and he asked in a gentle voice, "You don't need to worry about this king. You just need to follow your heart and answer this king. Are you willing in your heart? Being taken over by others, being chased out of your home, being forced out of your home for 10 years, suffering so much. Are you willing to let them get away with it and enjoy everything that should have belonged to you?" As long as she shook her head, he would take it all back for her. He had never cared about other people's misunderstandings and evaluations of him. He had never lived in other people's eyes. Chu Qingyan was a bit stunned hearing this. The big ice block's tone was so gentle. If he could be like this normally, how good would that be? She was afraid that she would drown in this gentle village. However, thinking about it was just thinking about it. She still seriously considered his question, and then smiled confidently and said, "When heaven is about to give a great responsibility to a man, it will definitely make his mind bitter, his body tired, his body empty, and his actions disrupted. Therefore, I believe that there is a reason for all these things that I have encountered, and I have never complained. As for the unforgivable things those people have done to us, I will not let them go. However, I want to take back what belongs to us with my own hands. Revenge is a dish best served cold." When she was strong enough and didn't need to borrow anyone's strength, she would personally take revenge for all the suffering she had suffered back then. Xiao Su looked at the resolute expression on the little fellow's face, and his eyes flashing with confidence. Suddenly, a wave of gratification surged in his heart. All right. He was waiting for her to break out of her cocoon and be reborn. No one could only rely on one person for their entire life. Only when one became indestructible could they protect themselves and the people they cared about. Although Gu Rong and Gu Yi weren't likable, they were very efficient. In a few moments, they had already moved everything onto the carriage. Chu Feng's parents followed behind them out of the Chu family's gate. Chu Feng's father ran over with a big black cat in his arms. Inverted spring onion, Kai Kai, this is a friend that Daddy adopted a few days ago. It's called Xiaohua. Chu Feng's father raised the big black cat's front paw and waved it at the two. Come Xiaohua, say hello to inverted spring onion and Kai Kai. The big black cat seemed to be very cold and didn't even want to look at them. Chu Feng's father was so angry that he stomped his feet. Only Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan felt a group of crows fly over their heads. Aha! Seeing that the big black cat wasn't cooperating, Chu Feng's father could only give up. At this moment, Chu Qingyan ran over to help her mother pack up. Chu Feng's father stood beside his son-in-law with the big black cat in his arms, and suddenly spoke. Inverted spring onion, Just now you admitted that I'm your father-in-law in front of everyone. Then you should learn from Kai Kai and call me daddy. Chu Feng's father widened his eyes, his face full of anticipation. You heard wrong. Xiao Su's expression didn't change as he said. Chu Feng's father frowned. That's impossible. Firstly, he wasn't old, and secondly, he wasn't deaf. How could he have heard wrong? But looking at inverted spring onion's expression, it didn't seem like he was lying. So did he hear wrong? Chu Feng's father was conflicted, and Xiao Su smiled faintly when he saw him. However, Chu Feng's father didn't forget the important matter at hand. He said righteously, Inverted spring onion, you won't be able to return from this trip. You have to take good care of Kai Kai. She's a little stupid and is easily bullied, so you have to pay more attention to her. Xiao Su raised his brows and looked at the little fellow beside the carriage. He didn't comment on Chu Feng's father's words. She was probably the only one bullying others on this trip. When the group separated, Chu Feng's father reluctantly raised the big black cat's front paw and waved it at the two of them. Chu Qingyan's eyes couldn't help but redden. Xiao Su raised a hand and patted her head. This prince promises you that he'll definitely bring you back safely. Whether dead or alive, he would protect her and bring her back safely. Chu Qingyan was still immersed in the sadness of parting, and didn't notice the strangeness in his words. Why did he say bring you back safely instead of bring you back safely? All right. She nodded. At the other end of the road. Dan Nyang, why do you think it's so difficult to hear my son-in-law call me daddy? Chu Feng's father was very vexed. Chu Feng's mother laughed. You miss it so much? It'll come one day. Chu Feng's father immediately perked up. When? His Highness and Kai Kai's wedding. Chu Feng's mother pursed her lips and smiled. Chu Feng's father immediately counted on his fingers. 12 golden hairpins, 13 cardamoms and 15 hairpins. That's still 5 years away. My hair is going to turn white from waiting. Chu Feng's mother couldn't help but pat the back of her husband's hand when she heard his gloomy tone. She comforted him. Time flies. 5 years will pass by quickly. Time flies like an arrow, and the sun and moon fly by. Time always pass by quickly. When Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su returned to the King of England's residence, Xining, who had been waiting for them, walked up and bowed to them. Mistress, the fourth prince is here. He wants to see you. Chu Qingyan was a little surprised. It had been 10 days since the assassination attempt on Xiao Ran, and she hadn't seen him even once. She had wanted to ask someone to pass a message to him before she left to express her feelings for him. But he had unexpectedly come by himself. She looked up at the person beside her and saw Big Ice Cube nod at her. Go ahead. She agreed and followed Xining to the side courtyard. She didn't know why he had chosen the side courtyard instead of the front hall. When she arrived, she only saw a man in a eunuch's uniform with his back facing her. She couldn't help but feel puzzled when she didn't see Xiao Ran. Just then, the man with his back facing her slowly turned around and called out in a low voice. Qingyan. Chapter 167. Chu Qingyan turned around and softly called out her name. Only then did she clearly see that the person standing in front of her was none other than Xiao Ran, whom she had not seen for more than 10 days. His much thinner appearance was even more handsome. Perhaps it was because of his injuries. His face was pale and his lips were devoid of blood. When Chu Qingyan saw that he had lost a lot of weight, out of concern for her friend, she could not help but grumble. Why are you running around when your injuries haven't fully healed? Don't you know how to take care of yourself? That face full of anger and concern that he had not seen in a long time made Xiao Ran's heart fill with warmth. All right, Qingyan, it wasn't easy for me to come out and find you, so don't just scold me. When he finished speaking, he could not help but cover his chest and lightly cough a few times. When Chu Qingyan heard that, she lightly sighed and walked forward to help him to a stone chair at the side to sit down. She raised her head to look around and suspiciously asked, Where are the people by your side to serve you? Why isn't a single one here? Xiao Su shook his head. I snuck out of the palace and did not bring anyone out. When Chu Qingyan heard that, she saw that he was wearing a eunuch's uniform and knew how he managed to sneak out of the palace. She could not help but scold him. If you wear a eunuch's uniform like this, who would know that you are the high and mighty fourth prince? If something were to happen, With your already injured body, how would you be able to take it? Hearing her long-winded nagging, Xiao Ran's face revealed a faint joy. When Chu Qingyan saw that he did not regret his rash actions and instead looked happy, she felt that it was a little strange and reached out to push his shoulder. Hey, did you hurt your brain? Otherwise, how could he suddenly become so silly? Xiao Ran suddenly smiled, as beautiful as the sun. Even though Chu Qingyan had seen all kinds of handsome men before, she still felt that her eyes were blinded by him. She had always thought that Big Ice Cube was a cool and adorable handsome man, while this Xiao Ran in front of her was an obedient and pure handsome man. Now that she saw him smile, she was even more certain that if this guy was in the modern world, he would probably be a complete young hunk. Just as Chu Qingyan was fantasizing, Xiao Ran looked at her, his smile fading slightly, leaving only a faint ripple at the corner of his mouth. With a serious expression, he slowly said, Qingyan, I don't think I hurt my brain, but my heart was stolen. What was this guy saying? That assassin stole his heart? Then how could he still be standing here? What kind of joke was this? Seeing that she was fooled by him, Xiao Ran didn't want to explain. He suddenly reached out to hold her hand, his expression becoming serious. Qingyan, eldest brother, is going to Fuli Mountain Range. It's a long and arduous journey, so you should stay in the Imperial City. I'll protect you. Xiao Ran's sudden action made her a bit confused. She couldn't help but pull her hand back, hesitantly saying, Xiao Ran, do you know that your mother and His Highness mother, your position and His Highness position are completely opposite? Although it's a bit blunt, but look at the things that have happened recently. Can you still be at ease with your situation? And as His Highness fiancé, do you think I'll be safe by your side? The word fiancé pierced his heart deeply. He lowered his brows dejectedly. He had finally found a girl he liked, but she was already his eldest brother's fiancée. Although his eldest brother's existence was like a god in his heart, he still couldn't accept it. He clenched his fists and slowly raised his head. Qingyan, you're 10 years older than Imperial brother. His personality is very stuffy. Will you be able to get used to it? If you say you're not used to it, I'll immediately take you away. I won't, we're fine. Chu Qingyan thought he was asking if she and the Big Ice Cube didn't have anything to talk about. Although there were times when they did, it was good for them to do their own things. Xiao Ran saw that she didn't have any worries and shook his head in his heart. It seemed like she still didn't understand what an engagement meant. Eldest brother had never been close to women and treated Qingyan like his own little brother or sister. So he secretly decided that when he grew up, he would go to Imperial father and Imperial mother to have Imperial father cancel the engagement between eldest brother and Qingyan. Imperial father loved him so much. As long as he wanted something, he would give it to him. So the only two things he needed to do now were to wait for Qingyan to grow up. At the same time, he needed to become strong. Only then would Imperial father and Imperial mother have a reason to agree. Towards Xiao Ran's sudden distraction, Chu Qingyan was a bit confused. She waved her hand in front of his eyes. Xiao Ran, why are you in a daze? I'll have someone quickly send you back to the palace. Otherwise, the matter of you sneaking out will be quickly discovered. At that time, it won't be so simple. I know I can't stay for too long. Wait a moment. Xiao Ran took out a wooden puppet from his bosom. His fingers clenched tightly, and then he handed it to her. I carved this a while ago when I was learning how to craft. Originally, I wanted to give it to you as a gift during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Unfortunately, you left too early and I couldn't find a suitable opportunity to give it to you. Then something happened. This time, it'll be a parting gift for you. Since you want to leave, I can't persuade you to stay. It'll be a long journey. If you miss me, you can take it out to sea. Xiao Ran said emotionally. After Chu Qingyan took it, although the carvings on it were a bit rough, it wasn't hard to see that the person on it was her. Her long dress fluttered, and there was a bit of a fairy descending to the mortal world. Chu Qingyan was pleasantly surprised. This was the first time she had received a handmade wooden puppet. She said sincerely, "Thank you." Xiao Ran looked at Chu Qingyan's bright and clear face in front of him, and his eyes gradually deepened. In the end, he reached out and hugged her. Although his voice was still a bit hoarse from his puberty period, it was already sufficiently affectionate. "Qingyan, You said before that all encounters in the world are reunions after a long separation. I look forward to the day we meet again. You have to take care of yourself." Before Chu Qingyan could react to what was going on, the person who had hugged her so tightly had already let go of his hand. With his back to her, he walked away step by step from her line of sight. "Because I'm afraid that if I turn my head, I won't be able to resist the urge to make you stay. Qingyan, wait for me. One day, I will have the power to protect you. Whatever you want, whatever you don't want, I will give it to you." Chu Qingyan held the wooden puppet in her hand, and finally came back to her senses. She smiled gently. "Xiao Ran, you take care too. Although the Sichuan emperor and consort, you were the main culprits who had caused Big Ice Cube's tragic childhood, and Xiao Ran's harm to Big Ice Cube was indirect, she still couldn't blame him. He was still too young. In her eyes, he was just a 12 or 13-year-old child. However, because she looked at this child with the mentality of a 20-year-old, she completely didn't expect that this young man in front of her had already developed feelings for her that he shouldn't have. Imperceptibly, it had an unpredictable impact on her future. Chapter 168. As night fell, the King of England's residence welcomed a rare guest. Xiao. With a pot of wine in his left hand and another in his right, he leisurely walked into the prince's residence. Hearing the servant's report, Xiao Su walked out of the room and happened to see his second brother standing under the banyan tree. He raised his hand and shook the wine pot in his hand, saying in a dissolute manner, "With the moon, the wind, and the departure, how can there be no wine to accompany it?" As he spoke, the wine pot in his hand flew towards Xiao Su. Xiao Su had always been in the mood to shake his head and sigh at this straightforward second brother of his, but tonight, he was indeed in the mood to drink. Thus, the two turned and walked towards the pavilion in the middle of the lake. They sat down in the pavilion. Huang Yi had already received the order, and quickly prepared 2 or 3 dishes to go with the wine, then left with the servants. Xiao Yao saw that Huang Yi was graceful and witty, so he couldn't help but tease. "Don't blame Imperial Brother Yu for not liking the women that Chindi sent up. It seems that there are beauties in the residence, so you don't like those common women." Xiao Su faintly glanced at him. "Put away your glib tongue, or you can leave immediately." Xiao Yao immediately spread his hands and compromised. Fine. Chindi is scared of you. You really take my good intentions for ill intent. If I didn't see that you were leaving, I specially came to see you off." "What? You don't even let me speak freely? After so many years, haven't you said enough?" Xiao Su disagreed. Xiao Yao nodded in agreement. "After being a dissolute for so many years, I'm somewhat used to it. Chindi finds that I'm becoming more and more charming." Listening to narcissistic people talking narcissistically, Xiao Su never interjected. "Forget it. You're such a dull and boring person. You won't understand even if I tell you about these romantic matters." Xiao Yao bit open the cork, and the fragrance of the wine immediately overflowed. 20 years of newer Hong, how is it fragrant? As he spoke, he helped to fill their cups. Xiao Su picked up the wine glass and took a sip. "Not bad. The color of the wine is pure and the taste is sweet. It is indeed a good wine. Of course, this is what I got from the heavenly fragrance brothel. It's the real deal." Xiao Yao laughed heartily, completely ignoring the fact that others would look down on him because of his description of the brothel. "How much longer do you want to stay in Fireworks Wine Alley?" Xiao Su slowly looked at him through the clear wine. He was supposed to be a proud son of heaven, but because of his decadence, he was disgraced by others. However, there was no disdain in Xiao Su's expression. It was as if he was just asking a younger brother who had been away from home for many days when he would return home. Xiao Yao's hand, which was holding the wine glass, paused for a moment. Then he slowly shook the wine glass and chuckled. The night was too dark to see if his smile was sincere or not. "It's been 10 years. I've already forgotten what I was like back then. On one side, I was depraved. On the other side, I was clear-headed. I struggled bitterly. It seemed like I was happy, but it also seemed like I was free. In reality, I lived a meaningless life." When he finished speaking, he downed the wine in his cup in one gulp. It was hard to tell whether it was sweet or bitter. As the wine entered his throat, his complex emotions swirled 1,000 times. Xiao Su turned to look at him. Although this was what his second brother said. Among the brothers in the imperial family, he lived the most thoroughly. He knew what he wanted and what he didn't want, so he always lived according to his own methods. I'm leaving tomorrow. Imperial father doesn't have many people he can use. Don't you plan on coming back to help Xishuan? Xiao laughed, then raised his eyes and shook his head with a smile. Imperial brother, oh Imperial brother, what should I say? He treats you like this, but you're wholeheartedly thinking of Xishuan. When you left the capital, you shouldn't have come back. Sooner or later, the burden on your shoulders will be as heavy as a mountain and crush you alive. Xiao Su's eyes flashed. In the end, he looked at the wine in his hand that was rippling slightly. As he drank it, a burning sensation immediately spread between his lips and teeth. It reached straight to his heart. Xiao quickly filled his cup and sneered. Imperial brother, I can understand your pain. Everyone is pushing you too hard. One needs you to contribute to the country, but doesn't want your contributions to overshadow your masters. The other needs you to protect your relatives, but restricts you. Fortunately, my mother only wants me to live well. As long as I live well, I don't need to worry about anything else. I'm also filial enough. I've always lived according to her wishes, so I'm carefree and unrestrained. He raised his brows and looked at his imperial brother in front of him. He continued, but what about you? You're filial to her, but she thinks you have ulterior motives and is always on guard against you. You're filial to her, but she's always dissatisfied and wants a yard when given an inch. Imperial brother, why do people have to live so tirelessly? Xiao Su gripped the cup in his hand, but his fingertips were turning white bit by bit. His second brother was right. He was in a dilemma. What he wanted to protect, he couldn't protect. What he wanted to abandon, he couldn't abandon. His life was difficult and powerless. Xiao sighed softly and filled his cup again. In this life, don't ask about the free and unfettered sky. Since ancient times, all things have flowed down the east. Imperial brother, look on the bright side. All right, after talking so much, why don't I see your little princess? When Xiao Su heard the word little fellow, the color in his eyes improved a lot. She's organizing the things for tomorrow's trip. TSK. I have to say, you've picked up a treasure. Your little princess, in terms of appearance, will definitely be a devastatingly beautiful woman when she grows up. Her temper isn't bad. As long as she's quick-witted, she might be able to help you if you encounter any trouble in the future. Xiao clicked his tongue somewhat enviously. You should also ask Imperial Grandfather to grant you a marriage. In any case, Imperial Grandfather is still in my residence. Xiao Su raised his brows and looked at him. His words were like a smile that wasn't a smile. When Xiao heard this, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. This proposal wasn't kind at all, okay? He almost forgot that Imperial Grandfather was still in the King of England's residence. He'd better not meet him, so as to avoid catching him and giving him all kinds of education. Ahem, Imperial brother. This younger brother suddenly remembered that there are chores in the residence to deal with. So, I have to prepare to leave. Xiao Ran smiled embarrassedly. He straightened his clothes and stood up. Xiao Su saw through his thoughts, but he didn't expose him. He filled his cup with wine and raised it to toast him. If you want to be yourself, go to Ingchun courtyard and find water spirit. She will arrange it for you. Xiao heard this and sighed softly. Imperial brother, you always think too much for others and too little for yourself. Xiao Su smiled self-deprecatingly. Because I'm the eldest brother. The eldest brother was like a father. The responsibilities that his father didn't fulfill, as the eldest brother, he could only take over one by one. Xiao understood his thoughts and finally raised his cup. This cup of wine, Imperial brother, I toast you. If this trip can be safe, this younger brother hopes that you will go as far away as possible and never come back. After Xiao finished speaking, he downed the wine in one gulp. Xiao Su paused for a moment, but in the end he drank the wine. The wine was rich and mellow, but for some reason, it was as bitter as a medicinal soup, making people unable to bear to frown. Xiao confidently tossed the wine cup aside, then turned his back to his imperial brother and waved his hand. He sang loudly. This trip will not be a good one, dreaming of the mortal world and hiding in the mortal world. Listening to the voice gradually fading away, Xiao Su held the wine cup in his hand and drank cup after cup. Chapter 169. Xiao Su held the wine glass in his hand and looked at the moon and stars in the night sky. Suddenly he felt that his life was empty. For nearly 20 years, he had scrupulously followed the rules and never stepped out of line. However, no one said to him that he had done a good job. What he got was either scolding or cold eyes. He raised his glass to the wind and moon. The first toast was to God, who allowed him to be born but never showed him the way to go. He drank it in one gulp. The second toast was to the royal family, who gave him a noble status but forgot to add the warmth of family. He drank it in one gulp. The third toast was to himself, who had been at a loss for so many years and still refused to turn back. He drank it in one gulp. The silver moon sprinkled down, as if draping a thin layer of gauze over the person, who kept repeating the action of drinking. It was hazy and carried a sense of sadness and loneliness. Every time he drank a cup of wine, his eyes became clearer. The more he drank, the brighter they became. He was like a cheetah hibernating in the night, his eyes eerie. But if someone walked closer to take a look, they would see that his clear eyes were filled with pain. His heart that had been silent for so many years was awakened by his second brother little by little. Those dusty past events that had been buried for a long time were once again uncovered. He had been betrayed, abandoned and hurt. However, from birth to now he had never stopped longing for family. The wine jar was empty and the night was dark. His heart sank. The cups and plates were in a mess and the moonlight was scarce. He stood up shakily. At this moment, only the wind and moon could accompany him. Chu Qingyan, who was packing, was a little worried when Xiao Su didn't come back. Didn't they say that the second prince came, and they were drinking and chatting happily? Why didn't the big ice block come back when the second prince had left? Thinking about it, she was a little worried. She told Hong Yi and Xining what she was doing, and then walked to the pavilion in the middle of the lake with the lanterns prepared by the servants. There were only patrolling guards along the way. Chu Qingyan asked a few servants and learned that the big ice block was still in the pavilion. She immediately quickened her pace. I heard that the second prince brought wine. I wonder if Big Ice Cube can hold his liquor well. Don't fall asleep like this. The autumn night is chilly. It would be bad if you catch a cold. As she thought of this, she became even more worried and her footsteps became even more joyful. However, before she reached the pavilion, she saw the person standing by the pavilion. She heaved a sigh of relief and slowly walked over. Big Ice Cube, it's late. We have to set off tomorrow. It's time to. Before she could finish her words, she saw the person who had turned around upon hearing her voice. His eyes were brighter than the moon in the sky. She couldn't help but stare blankly and forgot what she was going to say. With the center of the lake as the scenery, the person in front of him was in front of him. The autumn wind rushed into his sleeves, and his clothes fluttered. The silver-white mask flashed under the moonlight, and his black brocade robe seemed to blend into the dark night. However, the sparkling waves behind him seemed to have plated him with a layer of sparkling crystal, making him look like a god. Chu Qingyan stared at him in a daze. A thought flashed through her mind. He was clearly someone who could rely on his looks to make a living, but he always used his abilities to prove himself. Her big ice cube was really great. In her daze, she didn't notice that the person standing in front of her was a little dazed. He was a little at a loss, like a newborn child, with a bit of naivety. The little fellow in front of him seemed to be looking at him. Why was she looking at him? In the past, no one dared to look at him so calmly. However, when this little fellow looked at him, he didn't feel any displeasure. Instead, he felt a faint joy. Why? He suddenly didn't know the answer. One question after another drove him to slowly walk towards her. He was clearly a drunk person, but his steps were steadier than anyone else's. When she saw the big ice cube walking towards her, Chu Qingyan came back to her senses and couldn't help but grin. Just as she was about to report to him about the progress of her packing, a sudden breeze blew over, mixed with the faint fragrance of wine. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but frown. At this time, the person had already stood in front of her. She raised her head, but a hand fell down and gently caressed her cheek. Chu Qingyan stood there in a daze. Her bright eyes reflected a pair of beautiful eyes that were equally bright, but filled with uncertainty. Where are you from? A soft whisper sounded as if it was in a dream. Chu Qingyan suddenly woke up. Was the big ice cube drunk? Her entire body was surrounded by the intoxicating fragrance of wine, as if she was trapped in a wine cellar. She didn't answer, so the person who was caressing her patiently asked again. I'm from the 21st century. My surname is Chu, my name is Chu Yan. The person in front of her softly muttered her name a few times before his gaze fell back onto her face. His fingers caressed her cheek as he slowly said, Then will you leave? What's wrong with the big ice cube? Could it be that the second prince had said something to him? Why did he become so anxious after drinking? But now wasn't the time to care about this. She seriously and solemnly replied, No, I won't leave. Then how long will you stay? Many people have already left. His clear eyes were filled with a thin layer of mist, making it impossible for people to see what he was thinking. But she could clearly feel the sadness that came from his heart. Her nose suddenly turned sour as she said without hesitation, Unless you don't want me, we'll live and die together. We won't turn our backs on each other. She couldn't believe the words that came out of her mouth without thinking, but she didn't regret it. All right. The thin calluses that came from long-term martial arts practice slid across her delicate skin. Then he placed his hand on her slender shoulder and gently pulled her into his embrace. Chu Qingyan was shocked by the big ice cube's sudden action. What's wrong with the big ice cube? But she heard him say helplessly in her ear, It's too tiring to be alone. Lend me your shoulder for a while. Chu Qingyan's eyes turned sour when she heard that. Her hands that were hanging by her sides slowly lifted up and wrapped around his waist. I know that it's been hard on you for so many years. I wasn't here in the past, but now that I'm here, I won't let you live alone in torment. You and I will taste the sweetness together. You and I will share the bitterness together. The two of them hugged each other under the cool breeze and bright moon, warming each other's hearts. Little fellow, this prince is sleepy. After saying that, his breathing became even. But this made Chu Qingyan suffer. Such a big person leaned his entire weight on her. Even Chu Qingyan, who called herself a tough woman in the modern era, almost couldn't support it. But she still felt a little moved. She felt a little funny, a little sad, and a little relieved. She was moved. After going through so many things, the big ice cube was still able to maintain his original heart. Only when he was drunk would he unreservedly reveal the weakness in his heart. What was funny was that even though he was tired, he still remembered to tell her that he was sleepy. What was sad was that the big ice cube, who always put himself in other people's shoes, was really lonely. Fortunately, she was the only one who could see this fragile big ice cube. She felt that the distance between the two of them seemed to be one step closer. But Chu Qingyan suddenly patted her face. She clearly didn't drink, but why did she feel her cheeks heat up? Could it be that the wine didn't intoxicate her, but she was intoxicated herself? Beauty didn't intoxicate her, but she was intoxicated herself? Chu Qingyan teased herself and shook her head. Then she half dragged and half carried the big ice cube, resigned to her fate, and walked towards the main courtyard. But the breath that blew against her ear was a little itchy. She felt her ear faintly burning. Just when she was at a loss, she heard a murmur, and her whole body trembled. Chapter 170. When those words fell in her ears, Chu Qingyan turned in surprise to look at the person lying on her shoulder. Muhu, I knows that 10 years ago, you already wanted to give up on I. The soft words were filled with a sigh, despair, and loneliness. She seemed to hear the sadness that came from the depths of his heart. Chu Qingyan gritted her teeth and held back the tears that were about to spill out of her eyes. She raised her head to not let them fall. 10 years ago, was it that fire? She opened her mouth, wanting to take this chance to ask what had happened in the past. But those slightly closed eyes that covered all the light had a serenity that people couldn't bear to disturb. His thin lips were moist. If Big Ice Cube was a woman, people who saw this scene would want to kiss him, but she immediately stopped that thought. What had happened in the past 10 years? These 3 words had already become a knot in Big Ice Cube's heart, and also became her curse. Chu Qingyan secretly made a decision in her heart. She had to find the truth of what had happened in the past. She put one hand on Big Ice Cube's shoulder, and the other hand around his waist. She brought him step by step to the main yard. No matter how difficult it is, don't be afraid, I will accompany you. When you are tired, I will lend you my shoulder. When you are cold, I will open my arms for you. Perhaps my shoulder is not broad enough. Perhaps my arms are not warm enough. But as long as you need me, I will be there. Although I am not strong, have no power, and don't have great wealth, but what I have, I am willing to give it to you. You are the first person other than father and mother that has been good to me. I, Chu Qingyan, will always remember this. Although the road was not far, Chu Qingyan spent an entire hour to bring the person beside her to the main yard. Hong Yi and Cheng Yi, who were waiting at the entrance, saw them and were shocked. Then they immediately came forward, one on the left and one on the right, planning to support their lord. Young Princess Consort, you've worked hard. Let us do it. Hong Yi said with a smile. Chu Qingyan felt that this was a good idea. Just as she was about to nod, she felt the person leaning on her tightly hugging her. Her gentle brows suddenly furrowed, as if she was very resistant to human contact. Chu Qingyan saw this and sighed softly. Big Ice Cube didn't like to be touched by others, even when he was drunk. However, this was also good. A self-disciplined man was more reassuring. Chu Qingyan raised her hand to stop Hong Yi and Cheng Yi from approaching. She squeezed out a smile and said, "No need. I've already helped him here. It's not a big deal." Hong Yi and Cheng Yi heard this and had to retreat. Hong Yi's face was still worried, but Cheng Yi's face was already sour. The moment she finished speaking, Chu Qingyan felt the hand that was strangling her to the point of suffocation finally relax. Chu Qingyan rejoiced that she had finally understood his intentions. However, she had also suffered a lot in the future. Using all her strength, she finally placed the big ice cube on the bed. Chu Qingyan slumped to the side, almost collapsing. Hong Yi, who had already prepared hot water, brought it over. Cheng Yi went forward to untie her lord's belt and help him undress. When Chu Qingyan saw this, she remembered that Big Ice Cube was always the one who took care of his own clothes. Unless he wanted to tease her, he would ask her to do it herself. She had never seen him being served by anyone before. Hence Chu Qingyan spoke up. "Cheng Yi, you can leave first. I can take care of His Highness here." Cheng Yi's outstretched hands paused, and she felt a little embarrassed. She smiled embarrassedly. "Little Wang Fei, you must have spent a lot of energy supporting Wang Ye all the way here. Why don't you go back and rest first? This servant and Hong Jiejie have served His Highness for many years. It is only right that we work for His Highness." Chu Qingyan raised an eyebrow. This person mentioned that she was the old person who served Big Ice Cube. She didn't know if it was intentional or not. But from her tone, it was like she was drawing a line between her and Big Ice Cube. It was a little grating. Chu Qingyan curved her lips into a smile. "You've worked hard for so many years. But I will have to get used to these things in the future. Right now, I'm just practicing in advance." After saying this, Chu Qingyan didn't wait for her reply and turned to Hong Yi to say, "Hong Yi, put down the hot water and towel. Go and work on tomorrow's trip." Cheng Yi was ignored like this. Hong Yi looked at Cheng Yi's sullen face and quickly put down the things. Then she gave Cheng Yi a look to leave with her. Cheng Yi saw that Chu Qingyan had completely ignored her and could only leave unwillingly. But before she left, a trace of calculation flashed through her eyes that no one noticed. Chu Qingyan didn't miss the interaction between the two. She didn't care about this before because she wanted to be a rice worm who didn't care about the outside world. She only wanted to be an otaku to the end. But now, she had to keep her eyes and ears open because this marquee gate was too deep. If she wasn't careful, she would drown this rice worm. Shi Ning happened to be looking for her and found this place. She immediately entered the door. "Master, why are you here? Is Lord drunk? And you came just in time. There's hot water over there. Give me the towel after you need it. I'll help His Highness wipe." Chu Qingyan stepped forward to help Xiao slightly pull open his lapel to make him more comfortable. When she turned to instruct Xining, her fingers accidentally touched the skin on his chest. So smooth. Chu Qingyan lowered her head and couldn't help but poke it. It seemed to be very elastic. TSK. As expected, he exercised regularly. Otherwise, how could his body be so strong and curvy? No, she was going to drool. Cough cough mistress, here's the towel. Xining couldn't help but cover her eyes. This love-struck woman in front of her wasn't her mistress. No, no. Her charming fantasy was pulled back by Xining's voice. Chu Qingyan hurriedly withdrew her gaze and said, I didn't see anything. Xining cast her a suspicious look. Chu Qingyan gave a soft cough as she took the towel. She didn't look at how good his body was with her love-struck eyes, but seriously helped Big Ice Cube wipe. When the cloth brushed against his neck, Chu Qingyan suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu. It was as if she had done the same thing to someone before, and it had happened before she came to the ancient era. However, she could not recall it at that moment. She quickly cleaned up and pulled the blanket over him as she let out a soft sigh. At this time, Xining had already brought the water out. The room was very quiet with only the two of them. Chu Qingyan leaned against the bed as her eyes fell onto the person on the bed. This was her first time being alone in a room with Big Ice Cube sleeping peacefully, but she had to admit that Big Ice Cube's alcohol tolerance was quite good. Other people would go crazy after drinking, but he would be quiet after getting drunk. The soft candlelight shined on the mask on his face. The silver light shined and made her a bit dazzled. Suddenly, a bold idea flashed in her mind. She immediately sat up and stared at the mask like a tiger watching its prey. The night was dark and the wind was strong, so it was the best time to take off the mask. Chapter 171. It wasn't that she hadn't wondered what a masked face looked like before. She subconsciously felt that the Big Ice Cube's face shouldn't have been disfigured. In her free time in university, she would read a few transmigration novels. Many male protagonists used disfigurement to hide their true faces. She felt that the Big Ice Cube might be the same. She had tried many times to get the Big Ice Cube to take off his mask for her to see, but he would either ignore her or walk away by himself, so she didn't dare to speak again. Now that he was drunk and powerless, if she took the chance to take off his mask and put it back in place, she would be able to solve all her doubts. Wouldn't that be perfect? She licked her lips and slowly reached out her hand. Her heart was beating fast, as if she was unveiling the 18th birthday present her parents had given her. She was curious, expectant, and nervous. When her hand was about to touch the mask, his thick and long eyelashes moved slightly. She thought that he was about to wake up, so she quickly pulled her hand back in shock. But in the end he was still deeply asleep. So it was a false alarm. Chu Qingyan let out a sigh of relief. Why did she feel a bit guilty? After a while, she reached out her hand again. This time it was very smooth. When her fingers touched the ice-cold mask, the Big Ice Cube didn't react at all. She gave a sly smile and gently used her fingers to pick up the mask. But when the mask slowly left the Big Ice Cube's face, her heart suddenly became confused. So what if she knew or didn't know the Big Ice Cube's true face? If his face was intact and not disfigured, what would she do? If his face was disfigured and changed beyond recognition, what would she do? Was his true face really that important? If his face was intact, the Big Ice Cube must have his reasons for not leaving his mask for 10 years. Why would she break this balance for her own selfish reasons? If his face was disfigured, then what right did she have to pick at his scars? Wasn't that just sprinkling salt on his wounds? Chu Qingyan, Chu Qingyan, when you talk to someone, it has nothing to do with looks, status, or wealth. Didn't you despise people who pry into other people's privacy? Why do you want to be the person you used to hate? She slowly retracted her hand. Her eyes suddenly became bright and clear, no longer clouded over. She had to respect the Big Ice Cube. Unless he was conscious and willing to let her know, she would not do this secretly when he was unconscious. When she made this decision in her heart, she felt carefree all over. The sound of footsteps could be heard. Xining had returned. Master, do you want to rest? Tomorrow, they would leave the capital. This servant is worried that you won't have the energy tomorrow. Xining widened her almond eyes and asked with concern. Chu Qingyan smiled. I'll sit here for a while. The alcohol is surging up, and sometimes it's very uncomfortable. I'll go back to my room after a while. Xining nodded. Master's words are reasonable. Seeing her master staring at the Lord, she felt a little funny. Master, you know, in so many years, this is the first time this servant has seen the Lord drunk. This topic aroused her interest. Could it be that the Lord rarely drank in the past? It's not that he rarely drank, it should be that he almost never touched alcohol. The servants in the Fu have never seen the Lord drunk before. Occasionally he would come back from the palace banquets with the smell of alcohol, but that wasn't anything. Since her master had gradually gained a firm foothold in the Wangfu, Xining felt that as the most trusted subordinate of her master, it was necessary for her to grasp all kinds of information in the Wangfu. Moreover, it was mainly about the matters surrounding the Wangya, so that when her master needed it, it would come in handy. Now, she could talk about the Wangya's matters and accompany her master to relieve her boredom. Chu Qingyan nodded and turned to look at the person lying peacefully by her side. A trace of pity flashed through her eyes. Why was the person who rarely touched alcohol so drunk today? Was it because he was about to leave the capital and was reluctant? Or was it because of the emotions that had been suppressed for a long time that exploded? Big Ice Cube was a very strict person and was very self-disciplined. For him to have an emotional breakdown, how much pain did he have to endure for him to explode? It was hard for her to imagine. Actually, the straw that broke the camel's back was the straw. This trip to the Fuli mountain range seemed to be more than just mining for the Big Ice Cube. But her knowledge was limited and she couldn't analyze it, so she didn't have any clues right now. Perhaps she could ask Hua Ling and the others. It was already late at night and she couldn't hold on any longer. Seeing the Big Ice Cube sleeping deeply, she was relieved and brought Xining back to her room. When the door was closed, the master and servant left. The person hiding in the corner slowly walked out. A trace of pride flashed in her eyes. She had finally waited until Chu Qingyan left. Then after looking around to make sure no one was around, the orange dress slid across the wall as she silently approached Xiao Su's room step by step. Her jade-like fingers touched the door and gently pushed it open. She opened a small gap for a person to pass through and immediately went in. Then she quickly closed the door. Before Chu Qingyan left, she had blown out the candles on the table, so the room was a little dark. But the bright moonlight shone through the window and onto the ground, reflecting a weak light. When the person got used to the light, this little bit of light was enough to see everything in the room. She held her breath and felt that the person in the room had a stable breathing and was fast asleep. Her heart was filled with joy as she slowly walked towards the bed. She came to this room several times a day, so she was familiar with all the decorations. So she easily walked to Xiao Su's bed. The clear light shone on the person on the bed, giving off a sacred and inviolable feeling. His fine long hair was spread out on the bed, forming a sharp contrast with his smooth skin. It was as if there was an aura of abstinence. And those tightly closed eyes had thick and curly long eyelashes that made women envious. She hadn't seen his face, but she was already captivated by his elegance. The person in front of the bed was already mesmerized. If it was any other time, she wouldn't have dared to look at her master with such a bold gaze, because that would be offending her master. But now no one knew, and Lord was already asleep, so no one would come to disturb him. She suddenly gave a low and gloomy laugh. Tonight, she would definitely become one of His Highness's people. Otherwise, she didn't know when His Highness would return. If she waited until she was old, she would lose her value. As for imperial concubine Yu, she would probably be nothing more than an abandoned pawn. Originally, she didn't have any hope. But tonight when Lord was drunk, it gave her a glimmer of hope. In order to survive, in order to obtain glory and wealth, she could only take risks. And the person on the bed was Lord, whom she had admired for a long time. Her desire to take him for herself was as crazy as grass. So she couldn't wait to reach out to Xiao Su's belt. The moonlight was cold, but it illuminated her greedy eyes. She was Qingyi, who believed that wealth came from danger. Chapter 172. Chengyi held her breath. When her hand was about to touch that black belt, the person lying down suddenly opened his eyes. His sharp gaze was like the scorching sun piercing through the clouds. It was so dazzling that people couldn't help but close their eyes, not daring to meet his gaze. Chengyi's fingers froze. It was like her pressure points had been pressed, and she didn't dare to move. Xiao Su's cold gaze swept over the person who was about to approach him. His finger moved and the brocade quilt on his body flew up. The brocade quilt flew over, and before she could react, she felt like her entire body was bound. No matter how she struggled, she couldn't break free. Then a bad premonition floated in her mind. Xiao Su waved his hand and Cheng-Yi was wrapped up by the brocade quilt that came like a bolt of lightning. Then she flew out. The door suddenly opened at this time, and Cheng-Yi flew out of the room with the quilt. Before she could cry out, she had already smashed into the ground outside. Xiao Su stood up and brushed the creases on his clothes. Hearing the uncontrollable moans coming from outside, he coldly narrowed his eyes. Touching this kind of person was simply dirtying his hands. When he walked out of the room, Hualing was already standing by the door. Master. Cheng-Yi, who had fallen to the ground, was sobbing in pain. When she heard Hualing's salute, she immediately endured the pain and struggled to get up. Trembling, she knelt at the bottom of the steps and explained, "Your Highness, you've misunderstood this servant. This servant didn't mean to disturb your rest. This servant only wanted to go in and see if you were sleeping well. This servant was worried that you would feel uncomfortable in the middle of the night when you were drunk, so..." Xiao Su expressionlessly cut her off. "Is that so?" Even though she knew that His Highness was already suspicious, she still didn't let go of the chance to beg for mercy. She quickly nodded. "Your Highness, it's true. This servant isn't lying. This servant can swear to the heavens. The moon is my witness." Xiao Su thought of something the little fellow had once said and couldn't help but throw it back at her. "What makes you think that if you swear on the fickle moon, this prince will believe you?" Cheng-Yi had a bad premonition in her heart. His Highness wasn't planning on letting her go tonight. She couldn't help but panic in her heart. She crawled forward a few steps with her hands on the ground. Tears quickly flowed down her face. "Your Highness, Cheng-Yi has followed you for so many years and has always been loyal to you. How could I take advantage of this opportunity to harm you? You must believe this servant." "Your Highness." When Xiao Su heard this, he sneered. "When did this prince say that you were unruly?" Cheng-Yi's heart skipped a beat. She actually confessed without being pressed? Xiao Su didn't give her a chance to find an excuse. At this time, he looked directly at Cheng-Yi, who was kneeling at the bottom of the steps. "If it weren't for the fact that you've followed me for so many years, your life would have been in danger the moment you stepped through the door. Without this prince's permission, you casually entered this prince's room in the middle of the night. Have you been following the rules for so many years for nothing?" Cheng-Yi lowered her head and tightly gripped her skirt with both hands. She recalled that 8 years ago, when she was selected to train in the King of England's manor, the instructor's first lesson was to make them memorize the 4 imperfections. One of them was that they weren't allowed to enter the Lord's room in the middle of the night. For so many years, these senior servant girls had scrupulously abided by their duties, afraid of violating the rules set by the Lord. But tonight she clearly violated the rules. Tonight, she cut off all means of retreat. She didn't have a foolproof plan, so her lies were full of holes. She gritted her teeth. Her usually sharp and unkind teeth were hard to justify in front of the gloomy Lord. Her heart couldn't help but tremble. Her whole body couldn't help but tremble. Usually, as long as the Lord gave them a look, they wouldn't dare to say a word. But now the Lord was in a rage. How could her small body withstand it? The Lord. "Cheng-Yi, if it wasn't for the fact that you haven't made any mistakes in all these years, this prince wouldn't have touched you." Xiao Su suddenly spoke. Cheng-Yi raised her head and looked at the godlike person in front of her in confusion and horror. "Lord, what are you talking about? This servant doesn't understand a single word." Hualing, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but interject angrily. "Cheng-Yi, you keep calling the Lord your master, but do you think the Lord doesn't know who you're working for? Don't think that we can't dig out the person behind you just because they're hidden deep. Cheng-Yi, His Highness originally saw that you didn't do anything wrong and turned a blind eye, but that went to inform your master. Do you think we are blind?" Cheng-Yi was dumbfounded. She had been secretly keeping in contact with Consort Yu. She thought she was doing it secretly, but she didn't expect the Lord to see through her. Hualing continued angrily. "Cheng-Yi, I thought you were honest, but I didn't expect you to bite the hand that feeds you. Tonight, you sneaked into Master's room. Do you think we don't know what you're up to?" Xiao Li's riders were either the type who didn't care about appearances such as Turin, or the type who focused on technology, such as wood spirit, or the type who was exquisite and enchanting, such as water spirit, or the type who was calm and collected, such as ethereal, or the type who laughed and cursed all the time like Hualing. However, these were all their disguises. They were used to life and death, and were only loyal to Xiao Su. They didn't care about what happened in the outside world. If they encountered this kind of situation on a normal day, Hualing would have already taken care of it. However, this person had followed the Lord for many years. But in the end, he played the blame game and ignited the anger in his heart. What he hated the most was betrayal. Master had been betrayed by a close relative in the past, which was why he was so cold. Master didn't care about Chengyi's betrayal, but he couldn't swallow this anger. The companion he had spent so much time with was betrayed once again. This kind of feeling made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. He really felt bad for Master. Seeing the figure in the corner of the hallway, Xiao Su lightly said, "Take her away and interrogate her." With these words, her fate was already decided. Chengyi immediately kowtowed and said, "Lord, this servant had no choice. This servant didn't want to. I beg the Lord to show mercy. I beg the Lord to take into account that this servant has served you for so many years and spare the servant. Lord." Xiao Su turned around. This action already expressed his meaning. Chengyi couldn't help feeling despair, but she still kept crying and begging for mercy. Hualing went forward and sealed her mute acupuncture point. Then two black-clothed people appeared and dragged her away. The figure in the corner slowly walked over. The moonlight soaked her body bit by bit until it illuminated the tranquil expression on her face. Xiao Su watched as the little fellow yawned and walked closer. The gloominess on his face slowly dissipated. "We still have to leave tomorrow. Hurry and go rest. Let Hualing and the others take care of these things." She didn't ask what happened and didn't look at Chengyi who was being dragged away. She said this in a daze. He stroked the little fellow's head and replied. Chu Qingyan looked at the servants who ran out because of this big commotion, and slightly raised her eyebrows. Originally, Big Ice could directly take them down, but he insisted on taking care of them outside the room. Was he doing this for these people to see? Killing the chicken before leaving to warn the monkeys? Then in this King of England's palace, how many more spies were planted? Chapter 173. Xiao Su called for a servant to bring a cloak. Taking it, he put it on the little fellow's shoulders and then tied it in a knot. Hualing, who had ordered people to take Qingyi away, turned around and saw this loving scene. He shook his head and thought inside, Master was becoming more and more skilled at doing these things. Did he really treat little Wang Fei as his own daughter? The image of his 10-year-old master, holding the baby-sized little princess, appeared in his mind. Hualing immediately trembled from his own thoughts. No, it must be that he hadn't rested well recently for him to have these random thoughts. Hualing patted his head. He decided to go sleep. Big Ice Cube, good night. She wouldn't ask about these things, but that didn't mean she couldn't see what was happening. Chu Qingyan coldly swept her eyes over the people in the yard and sneered in a low voice. If there were any other small movements that dared to hurt the Big Ice Cube, then this girl would deal with them when this girl came back from mining. The next day, Chu Qingyan appeared in male clothing in front of Xiao Su. Xiao Su turned and saw the clothes she was wearing and couldn't help but feel it was familiar. Seeing the Big Ice Cube's slightly surprised expression, Chu Qingyan proudly spun in a circle in front of him, and then asked, "How is it? Your clothes from more than 10 years ago fit me well, don't they?" Xiao Su faintly looked at her and mercilessly attacked. Ben Wang's clothes when he was 8 years old, on you who is almost 11 years old, it does fit you well. Being looked down upon for her height, Chu Qingyan puffed out her cheeks and then deflated. It was true that compared to the Big Ice Cube, she was a bit short. But she was a girl who was almost 11 years old that was as tall as her. Stand up, she promised she wouldn't beat you to death. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to her dejected little face. He turned to Hong Yi and asked, "Why did you give Wang Fei old clothes? Could it be that Ben Wang can't even afford this little bit of silver?" Chu Qingyan's stabbed heart suddenly healed. She licked her lips. Last night he caught the traitor as an example, and this morning he was going to give her a proper status? It seemed like it wasn't that the big ice cube didn't know about the inner residence. He just didn't want to interfere normally. Chi, the big ice cube was hiding his strength. However, this matter really had nothing to do with Hong Yi. When Chu Qingyan saw Hong Yi's awkward expression and didn't know how to answer, she immediately explained, "Don't blame Hong Yi. I wanted to wear them." Hearing this, Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Hearing her words, if the clothes were intact, they could be passed down to the next generation as family heirlooms. Xiao Su patted her little head. "And if you need anything in the future, just tell me. This prince doesn't lack this bit of money, as long as you're happy." Chu Qingyan was confused. Why did the big ice cube give off the feeling of a domineering CEO when he said this? A large fish pond suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. "Look, you've taken over the entire fish pond. Ha ha ha, what a wild imagination." Fortunately, she stopped this illusion in time. All right. How could she miss out on this opportunity when the big ice cube opened his mouth? For the sake of her future life as a rice worm. They were going to set off in an hour. Xiao Su was sipping his tea quietly while Chu Qingyan was busy going through the things that they had brought along with them. Xiao Su's gaze finally landed on her body. When she wore this fine brocade dress, he felt that she had grown a lot in the past half year. Her long hair was tied up high, black like a waterfall flowing down. Her facial features were distinct and her small face was exquisite. She looked exactly like a noble young master. The 11-year-old her seemed to see himself when he was 8 years old. He sipped his tea. Work hard, struggle, and strive to improve. The happy childhood that he hadn't had time to experience, he would give it to the little fellow. He would enjoy the 2 times together. His thin lips slowly hooked up and the smoke curled up. Sui dispersed the sorrow of parting. A faint thought appeared in his mind. It seemed like his family's daughter was slowly growing up. Xiao Su shook his head, feeling that it was a bit funny. Because they were going out to carry out a mission and not sightseeing, there was no need for any extravagance, so they couldn't bring many people. However, the big ice cube had given her the task of choosing people early on. She had also chosen carefully. She couldn't do without people around her, but one Xining was enough. She couldn't eat without Huang Yi. Moreover, she heard that the big ice cube had 2 maidservants by his side. One was Lu Yi, who was in charge of accommodation, and the other was Qing Yi, who was in charge of travel. Lu Yi had returned home to visit relatives, and was returning home today. Qing Yi usually didn't stay in the inner courtyard, so she had never seen her before. However, since these 2 were in charge of the mission, she felt that the big ice cube would need them this time, so she brought them along. Lani was gentle and weak, so it was fine. Ziyi hadn't come out yet, so there was still Hong Yi. However, she didn't know why, but Hong Yi, who always had a gentle smile and was highly respected by the servants, had a trace of vigilance in her heart. She didn't know why, because a woman's sixth sense was always inexplicable, but it was surprisingly accurate. Moreover, the management of the inner courtyard couldn't be done without Hong Yi, so she arranged for her to be fully in charge of the inner courtyard. Hong Yi didn't show any emotion, and still had a gentle expression on her face as she took care of the management matters. So on this trip, she brought the big ice cube's 3 maidservants with him. They couldn't lack food, shelter, and transportation. Then there were a few second-grade maidservants and a few manservants. Adding everything together, there were around 10 people. Before leaving, she gathered all the stewards and servants in the palace. She was just explaining the following matters, and beating up the servants who wanted to slack off when their masters weren't here. Kuo Ling and the others who came out with their bags saw the little princess give a proper lecture, and they all gave her a thumbs up. After the lecture, Chu Qingyan directed everyone to move the boxes onto the carriage. Everything was done in an orderly manner, and there was no need for anyone to worry about it. Kuo Ling and the others gave her a thumbs up in their hearts. When they were about to get on the carriage, Chu Qingyan also saw Lve and Qing Yi. Lve was gentle and polite while Qing Yi was lively. The 2 of them bowed to her, and Chu Qingyan secretly looked them over before arranging a carriage for them. Anyway, they had all been trained, so they knew what to do on the road better than her, so she didn't need to waste her breath. Everything was prepared. Set out. Kuo Ling rode his horse in front, and there were guards on both sides of the carriage. Each person had a serious expression, but they were dressed like normal servants. They walked casually, but if someone who understood the layout saw this, they would be surprised to find that although these people didn't seem to have any order in their movements, no matter where someone attacked, they would be blocked outside. Hong Yi was standing at the door sending them off. She watched the carriages leave, and her eyes were as cold as ice. After finishing everything, Chu Qingyan, who was lying down in the carriage, looked at Xiao Su, who was leisurely reading a book, and her heart suddenly felt a bit unbalanced. Big Ice Cube, my hands and feet are sore, quickly give me a massage. Chapter 174. Chue Chue? Xiao Su's gaze shifted from the book to her. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt as if she was possessed by ice and immediately changed the topic. She coughed lightly to cover it up. No, I didn't say anything. You heard wrongly. Xiao Su felt that it was a little funny when he heard that. He then shifted his gaze back to the book. Chu Qingyan heaved a sigh of relief. She leaned against the wall of the carriage and rubbed her arms. She was fantasizing about her upcoming life. Although Big Ice Cube was going to mine, the Sichuan Emperor did not give him a time limit. So she could grind Big Ice Cube along the way and swim down the mountain to play in the water. Wouldn't that be perfect? But she didn't know if Big Ice Cube, this workaholic, would agree to her request. She rubbed her arms and couldn't help but feel vexed. It wasn't easy for her to come out. She wanted to take a good look at this era that spanned 1,000 years, and see what kind of scenery there was. Xiao Su, who was flipping through the book, couldn't help but hold his forehead when he heard this sigh. Come here. Suddenly hearing someone speak, Chu Qingyan raised her head to look at the person in front of her. Are you calling me? There's a third person in the carriage? Xiao Su looked at her. Oh. Chu Qingyan moved over. Although there was only her and Big Ice Cube, the carriage was very big. It could accommodate at least 5 or 6 people. She moved over with difficulty and looked up at him curiously. Stretch out your hand. Xiao Su ordered. Oh. Chu Qingyan, who was still thinking about playing in the mountains and swimming in the water, gave an order. Xiao Su stretched out his hand to hold her little arm. His fingertips wandered around her acupuncture points and gently tapped. The strength was just right, but his expression was still cold and indifferent. It was as if he wasn't helping the little fellow in front of him to relax her muscles and bones, but was wiping a sword. Chu Qingyan didn't expect Big Ice Cube to be so obedient and help her. She was secretly delighted. After rubbing with her other hand, she turned around. There's more. Xiao Su smiled. His fingers landed on her shoulder and moved slowly. Chu Qingyan felt a warm current flowing out from his nimble fingertips and into her blood vessels. The blocked meridians were unblocked bit by bit, and she felt refreshed all over. After everything was done, she couldn't wait to turn around and ask, Big Ice Cube, were you using your internal energy to unblock my meridians? Xiao Su replied indifferently. Then he picked up the book that was placed at the side and continued to flip through it. Chu Qingyan's interest was piqued. She turned around and asked, Big Ice Cube, is your inner strength very high? Was his martial arts very powerful? Could it be that if one possessed inner strength, they would be able to regulate their own breathing? For example, I can circulate my qi to reduce my fatigue when I'm tired? All of a sudden, all the questions came pouring out like beans. Xiao Su glanced at her and felt that these questions could be ignored. Do you want to learn? Chu Qingyan's widened eyes immediately sparkled. She nodded without hesitation. Then from today onwards, if the carriage is resting, you can practice martial arts. Chu Qingyan shuddered. The scenery along the way was so beautiful, and she was just going to stay there and practice martial arts? No, I think it's better to forget about it. Xiao Su seemed to have expected this. He shook his head and glanced at her. Then he looked away and continued to read his book. She puffed up her cheeks. She felt that she had been despised by the Big Ice Cube, but she really didn't want to waste this good time on practicing martial arts, okay? She had been despised by the Big Ice Cube many times anyway, so it didn't matter if it happened one more time or one less time. Xiao Su glanced at a certain someone who had given up on herself, and calmly turned the page. Inside the palace, Sichuan Emperor was reviewing memorials when eunuch Xiao entered the hall and reported, Your Majesty, His Royal Highness has left the capital. Sichuan Emperor put down the memorials in his hands and rubbed his forehead. We understand. Seeing this, eunuch Xiao immediately asked, Your Majesty, are you tired? Do you want to rest? No need. Sichuan Emperor shook his head. His gaze fell outside the window. It was in the direction of the city gate that Xiao Su had left. He had a faint premonition that he had made an unwise decision this time. But once he decided on something, he would not allow it to be changed. At this moment, a eunuch outside the hall announced loudly, Consort Yu has arrived. Consort Yu, dressed in a pleated moon dress, leisurely entered the hall. Your Majesty, I have boiled a cup of ginseng soup for you. Please drink it while it is hot. Consort Yu's voice was gentle and soft. There was a sweet hint of annoyance in her voice, and the smile on her face was just right. Sichuan Emperor was pleased to hear this. He reached out and took her in front of him. He said sympathetically, You can just ask the palace maids to do these trivial things. Why do you have to do it yourself? Consort Yu smiled gently. Your Majesty, how can I let an outsider serve you? Moreover, this is a high-quality 100-year-old ginseng from my maiden family. I am afraid that the palace maids will not be able to make it well. Wouldn't it be a waste of the ginseng? Consort Yu was very careful with her words. She had only mentioned the Fu family in front of Sichuan Emperor, so it did not seem deliberate. Sichuan Emperor's tiredness dissipated. He patted the back of her hand and sighed. Your parents are very considerate. It must have been hard on you. Consort Yu covered her mouth and chuckled. She blinked and said coquettishly, Your Majesty, what are you talking about? You are my heaven, my earth, and my support. It is only right for me to do these things for you. Moreover, the Fu family has always been loyal to the Sichuan imperial family. Your Majesty, you don't have to be so courteous with me. Sichuan Emperor was very pleased to hear this. He reached out and pinched Consort Yu's cheek. He said in a flirtatious tone, I will go to your place tonight. Consort Yu's fair face was instantly dyed red. She lowered her eyes and punched Sichuan Emperor's chest. She said angrily, Your Majesty is so mean. The Wuxian Emperor burst into laughter as soon as he finished speaking. After a while, Consort Yu looked at Sichuan Emperor, who was drinking the ginseng soup. She asked casually, Your Majesty, why are you sending His Royal Highness to Fuli Mountain Range? It is quite far away. It will be a difficult journey. Why don't you send the other officials? Hearing this, Sichuan Emperor put down the bowl of soup. Consort Yu immediately handed him a handkerchief. Sichuan Emperor took it and wiped the corners of his mouth. He looked at Consort Yu, who had a confused look on her face, and said slowly, You are still so considerate of Su-er, but he might not appreciate it. Your Majesty, what are you saying? His Royal Highness is your flesh and blood. I also see him as my own child. It is natural for me to care about him. Consort Yu shook her head with a smile. Sichuan Emperor smiled. Then his eyes turned cold. It is not convenient for us to tell you this. But you have to believe that we are making plans for Ranner. Consort Yu narrowed her eyes. What was it that made His Majesty so secretive? However, she didn't reveal any of her thoughts on her face. She continued to serve him with all her heart. But her heart had already turned 100 times. No matter what His Majesty was planning, she had to make sure that Xiao Su would never return. Chapter 175. Perhaps this was the difference between her and Empress Liang. One was expressionless while the other showed all her emotions on her face. Men always liked the cute and lovable type, so it was destined that Empress Liang would not be able to beat Consort Yu. Eunuch Xiao had already left when Consort Yu went in. When he heard the teasing from inside, he sighed in his heart. In this inner palace, although the concubines were all treated equally, only Consort Yu could receive this kind of treatment. She was favored by the inner palace and received the emperor's love. He raised his head to look at the city gates with a bit of pity in his heart. His Royal Highness, take care of yourself. The carriage traveled for half a day before stopping to rest. There was a small lake nearby, and at this time, the servants took out pots, bowls, ladles, basins, and other utensils from the carriage. Huoling saw this scene when he got off the horse and jumped in fright. He asked Huang Yi, who was in charge, Did you move the entire kitchen? Huang Yi patted the dust off her hands and replied with a smile. This was ordered by the little princess. I'm just following orders. However, you also know that I'm in charge of the food. If I don't have these utensils, how can I cook for everyone? So when the little princess had her prepare the utensils, she had raised both her hands and feet in agreement. Hualing clicked his tongue. The little princess was truly a foodie. Xiao Su got off the carriage and saw the servants methodically burning the fire and cutting the vegetables. He raised a brow. You ordered this? Tu Qingyan giggled. She never thought of hiding it because as long as it was time to eat, these things would be exposed. She said with a smile. Big ice cube. People are made of iron and rice is made of steel. If I don't eat, I'll be hungry. So, these are all necessities for a long trip. Oh no, it's for a long trip to mine, so I brought them along. Xiao Su poured a bucket of cold water on her. You brought them along with you in a carriage? Chu Qingyan complained. Can you not tear me down like this? If you have the skills, don't eat it later. However, she wouldn't dare to say this out loud even if she was beaten to death, because the one who wouldn't be able to eat it later would probably be her. At this time, Hualing walked over and overheard the conversation between the two masters. He couldn't help but explain, Little princess, in another 2 or 3 days, we will probably enter a desolate place. I'm afraid that when we get there won't be any ingredients to cook. That's why Lord is worried that these things will become a burden and can't be used. Tu Qingyan couldn't help but smile. Hualing, I've studied the map. I've considered all of this, so don't worry. Hualing nodded when he heard this. Little Princess Consort was becoming more and more methodical, so he was not worried. By the way, where is Turin? Why didn't I see him along the way? Tu Qingyan looked around, but she still couldn't find him. Normally, he was always inseparable from Hualing. Why did he disappear the moment he left the city? Hualing smiled mysteriously. Little princess, it's because this subordinate is an open guard and Turin is a secret guard. Tu Qingyan immediately understood what he meant when he told her to stop. Hualing was the guard that followed by Big Ice Cube's side, and Turin was hidden in the shadows, responsible for protecting it from the shadows. She thought about it and then turned to say to Xining, go and take out some of the food we prepared yesterday and give it to Hualing. Hualing watched in confusion as Xining left. When she came back, there was a white cloth bag in her hand. This is? Hualing took the white cloth bag and opened it to take a look. He found that there were 2 small bags inside. One bag was steamed buns that were cut to the thickness of a palm, and the other bag seemed to be dried meat. Tu Qingyan saw his surprise and couldn't help laughing as she said, give the things to Turin and tell him to take out 2 steamed buns and a piece of meat. Use the steamed buns to hold the meat, and it's ready to eat. This is called rujiamo. If possible, you can heat up the rujiamo in the fire. The taste will be even better. Hualing looked at the things in the bag in disbelief. This was his first time hearing this method of eating. It felt so fresh, he would secretly try it later. That's right, I don't know how many people he has with him. If it's not enough, I'll send people to get more. There's a lot, so there's no need to worry about not having enough. Moreover, I've already taught Huang Yi how to make these jerkies. When we rest on the road, she will roast the meat and hang it on the roof of the carriage to dry. You guys will be responsible for looking after it when the time comes. Don't let the birds take it away. Tu Qingyan thought about it and casually said this. Since Turin was in the shadows, he definitely wouldn't show himself to eat with them, so they could only wrong them like this. Hualing turned around to look at the nailed roofs of the carriages. No wonder the little princess ordered Hualing to remake the carriages, so it was for this reason. It had to be said that the little princess had done all she could to eat, but this was also good. They would have enough food on the road, so they wouldn't have to eat steamed buns every day like before. Thinking of this, Hualing's heart was filled with tears. It really was good to have a head wife. Woo-woo little princess, how good would it be if you appeared earlier? We've been eating stone-like steamed buns for several years now. So Hualing was willing to be a diligent worker drying the meat for free. But if Tu Qingyan knew what he was thinking right now, she would spit out 3 liters of blood. Appear earlier? How early? She didn't want to transmigrate as a baby and not be able to take care of herself. She followed Hualing's gaze to look at the carriages. Actually, she had spent quite a bit of effort on these carriages. Was it just drying meat? No, it wasn't that simple. The retired emperor sat in the chair prepared by the servants. He stroked his beard and laughed. I say, grandson, you've picked up a treasure. Such a thrifty and diligent wife. It's rare to meet one. It was like this was a marriage bestowed by this one, and he loved to praise this one. Xiao ignored him. His eyes swept over the nailed roofs of the carriages, and then he looked at the folding chairs in front of him as he fell into deep thought. At this time, Hualing walked over and said in a voice filled with admiration, Master, the little princess is truly smart. This subordinate never thought of the structure of these carriages. Not only can they be used to dry things, they can also be used to defend against sneak attacks. The two ends of the nails were specially made sharp. If someone took the chance to land on them, they would experience the feeling of being pierced by needles. Moreover, this subordinate never thought that the chair could be made into a foldable shape. When it is needed, it can be opened. When it is not needed, it can be folded and put away. It does not take up space and is convenient to carry. Young Princess Consort's idea is really novel. Turin's eyes lit up. He was already the only one in the world of creativity. Now that he saw the little princess reveal this skill, he was instantly filled with passion. It was rare to hear Turin praise someone so sincerely. The people under him were all leaders in their own fields. Although they didn't think they were extraordinary, they still had their own pride. It could be seen that this little fellow really hid his strength well. A faint smile appeared in Xiao's eyes. But on the following road, Chu Qingyan's actions made everyone's jaws drop again and again. Chapter 176. Chu Qingyan walked to the resting area, and saw that Big Ice Cube and Imperial Grandfather were both sitting on the chairs specially made for her by the wood spirit. Her heart was filled with joy. However, the moment she sat down, she saw Imperial Grandfather's cheeks puffed up. She didn't know what he was chewing, but when she saw the minced meat at the corner of his mouth, her face instantly darkened. Imperial Grandfather, you went to get a Rujiamo to eat? The Emperor Emeritus immediately shook his head. Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't admit that someone of his noble status would do something like stealing food. Chu Qingyan sighed. Imperial Grandfather, you're too fast. I originally wanted to teach you another way to eat. The Emperor Emeritus's eyes emitted a green light, like a hungry wolf that saw its prey. He forcefully swallowed the food in his mouth and impatiently said, What other way to eat? Quickly say it. As soon as he finished speaking, the Emperor Emeritus felt that he had been tricked, because the yen lass in front of him was looking at him with disdain. The Emperor Emeritus smashed his bowl in dissatisfaction, and turned to his grandson for help. Sewer, quickly control your lass. She's so impudent. She dares to treat her elders like this now. Who knows if she'll dare to make you starve in the future? Xiao looked at him indifferently. Grandson won't steal food. A bolt from the blue. His grandson had turned evil, and was led astray by his little wife. He was full of grievances and quietly muttered, Isn't it just stealing a Rujiamo? So petty. Chu Qingyan looked at the Emperor Emeritus, who was drawing circles on the side, and couldn't help but find it funny. She felt that she needed to explain, so she took the soup that Huang Yi had scooped and handed it to him. She said with a smile, Imperial Grandfather, the Rujiamo is too dry. It won't be too late to eat it after drinking some soup. Otherwise, it won't be good if you choke. The Emperor Emeritus smelled the fragrance, and the haze on his face cleared away. Yen lass, we know you're the best. Chu Qingyan felt that this Emperor Emeritus really was like an old urchin and couldn't help but say, In the future, you can take whatever you want to eat. Don't be polite. The Emperor Emeritus immediately glanced at her, lowered his eyes, and asked in a small and uncertain voice, Really? Seeing how careful he was, Chu Qingyan's heart softened. She nodded seriously. Yes. The retired emperor's eyes widened, his face beaming with joy. He immediately turned to Gurong and said, Help me move the pastries from the last carriage to my carriage. Chu Qingyan almost hit her head on the tree behind her. Fortunately, Big Ice Cube was quick enough to hold her head. Gurong was a personal guard assigned by Xiao to the retired emperor. The retired emperor waved at her. Yen lass, Thank you. Looking at the Emperor Emeritus's complacent appearance, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but admit that the older the ginger, the spicier it was. She was still too naive. She would never play with him again. Humph. When Xiao Su saw this, for some reason he felt like laughing. It was a rare sight for him to see his family in such a harmonious and joyful manner. Big Ice Cube, I've prepared some non-sweet pastries for you. I had intended for you to pass the time on the road, but I'm afraid you can only drink tea to accompany the air. Chu Qingyan looked at the cloth bags that Gu Rong was carrying in her hands, in her arms and on her shoulders. She couldn't help but turn to him and sighed. Xiao Su laughed in spite of himself as he patted her head. It's fine. Chu Qingyan turned to look at the Emperor Emeritus, who was happily drinking his soup, and couldn't help but smile. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. After the group finished their lunch, they rested for a while and prepared to set off. Just at this moment, a man dressed in black appeared in front of Xiao Su. Master, the carriages have already left the city in different directions according to your request. The people inside have all changed their appearances, so that no one will notice the difference. Xiao Su calmly replied. Chu Qingyan pondered in her heart when she heard this. When they left the city gates today, she discovered that there were more than 10 carriages following behind them, but in the end, they all disappeared. She thought that it should be the Big Ice Cube smokescreen. No one knew what would happen along the way, so it was best to be careful. But what made her feel even more uneasy was that when she left the city gates, there was a voice in her subconscious that warned her of danger. She closed her eyes. Since they were already out of the city, then let nature take its course. She had a strong backing by her side, so she wasn't afraid. At this moment, Xiao Su had already entered the carriage. When he saw the little fellow's scrunched-up face, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you still angry at Imperial Grandfather for taking away all the pastries?" When Chu Qingyan heard that, she regained her senses and smiled slyly. "How am I such a petty person? Moreover, when we reach Jiangnan in a few days, we can buy whatever delicious food we want. When that time comes, if Imperial Grandfather can't finish the pastries in the carriage, he won't be allowed to eat the newly bought pastries. It's very shameful to waste food." Xiao Su shook his head. "That's right, you're not petty at all." After eating and drinking her fill, Chu Qingyan lazily leaned against the wall of the carriage, listening to the Big Ice Cube teasing her. She shrugged her shoulders. It wasn't that she wanted to make things difficult for retired Emperor, but she felt that he had hidden too many secrets from her. She would probably encounter countless hardships in the future. It was too much. However, everything was just for fun. Retired Emperor was like an old urchin, and she liked to play with him. At this moment, Gu Rong's voice sounded from outside the carriage. "Young Princess Consort, retired Emperor invites you to taste the pastries together." Chu Qingyan looked up in surprise. At this time, the pastries had already been handed over. After Chu Qingyan received them, she inspected the pastries to see if there were any problems. After confirming that there were no problems, she picked up a piece of plum jade cake and put it in her mouth. She was puzzled as she asked the person in front of her, "Imperial Grandfather's behavior seems a bit strange. Did he suddenly have a conscience?" But it was a bit impossible. He regarded pastries as his life, and was wild with joy just now. He was simply like an ancient version of Granddad. Xiao Su hit the nail on the head. Imperial Grandfather came back to his senses and felt that you had a trick up your sleeve, so he offered the pastries to show his sincerity. He hopes that you will be lenient in the future. Fuck. Chu Qingyan couldn't swallow the pastry in her mouth. She looked at the 3 pieces of pastries on the plate. She only had 4 thumb-sized plum jade cakes in her mouth. It was rare for Imperial Grandfather to make a move. Even if he wanted to bribe someone, he shouldn't do it like this. Do you think it's too late for me to retreat now? It's already too late. Sob sob. Chu Qingyan felt that she had been hit again and again. She needed to be comforted. Looking at the little fellow who had fallen head first into his arms, Xiao Su gently patted her head. After thinking about it, perhaps Imperial Grandfather's idea of traveling together was a good idea. At least it could slowly train the little fellow's IQ. Thus His Royal Highness, who was usually protective of his own, decided that in the future, He would not intervene in the battle of wits between the little fellow and imperial grandfather. If Chu Qingyan knew what Xiaosu was thinking at this time, she would probably vomit blood. Fighting with the retired emperor to improve her IQ? And then he would watch with folded arms? Could he not be so heartless? Thus, the whole journey passed by in such a way. Chu Qingyan and the others welcomed the first night outside of the capital. As night fell, the residence of the King of England welcomed a group of mysterious people. Chapter 177. It was already late at night, but the quiet King of England's palace was not calm at this time. On top of the high wall, dozens of black shadows leaped up. The person in the lead was dressed in purple. His demonic eyes swept across the palace that was somewhat hazy under the light of the lanterns, and the corners of his mouth curled into an ambiguous smile. The night was dark and the wind was strong. It was the best time to make a move. He gently waved his hand, and the black-robed people following him were like arrows that left the bow. They quickly scattered to every corner of the palace like ghosts, and no one noticed them. Higashio Motetsu looked at the inner courtyard of the King of England's palace that was not as guarded as last time and raised his brows. As expected, he had to search when Xiaosu was not here. This time, he brought the best hidden guards who were good at qinggong. They were very good at hiding, so it was not a problem for them to hide from the guards inside. So he swept his eyes over the direction and flew towards the study. Success or failure, it all depended on this one move. At this time, Chu Qingyan's group had stopped to rest. The fire was burning. Hualing arranged for guards to take turns. Right now, in this place where there were no villages or shops, safety was very important because it was said that bandits often appeared here. Moreover, at night, fierce beasts would appear, so Hualing did not dare relax his vigilance. It was already late autumn and the night was very cold, so it was not suitable to sleep in the carriage. But Chu Qingyan was already prepared. She ordered people to take out the things in the carriage. At first, no one knew what it was, but when Mu Ling ordered people to prop it up on the ground, everyone was surprised to find that these things could be propped up and turned into tents. Chu Qingyan nodded her head in satisfaction. Back in the king's residence, she had only described the appearance and material of the item to the wood spirit, and the wood spirit had actually been able to understand it and make it in an instant. As expected, the big ice cube subordinates were indeed powerful. This kind of tent was modeled after the modern world's camping tents. The fabric was made from Sichuan's special ink yarn. It was not easy to get wind and was light. It was simply a necessity for traveling at home. The Emperor Emeritus patrolled the area with his hands behind his back. He stroked his beard and said to Chu Qingyan out of the blue, "Yen lass, the things you have there are really not bad." Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. "Imperial grandfather, is it really good for you to say it out loud?" When Xiaosu heard this, he turned to look at her. She immediately played dead. "All right, I'll sleep here tonight." The retired emperor simply didn't care about Chu Qingyan's predicament. He chose a tent and immediately went in. He even sighed comfortably. Chu Qingyan and Xiaosu each chose a tent and went to rest. It was late at night. Outside, there was only the sound of the burning firewood and the whistling of the mountain wind. The night was still quiet. Xiaosu was lying in the tent. His body was covered with a blanket that had been basked in the sun. He could still feel the warmth of the sun. He slightly hooked his lips. He had to admit that this little fellow in this short day had given him too many unexpected surprises. Just as he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly heard a series of footsteps slowly approaching from the side. Then, he saw a shadow reflected on his tent through the firelight. Finally, the shadow hesitated outside for a moment before raising its hand and patting his tent lightly. "Big Ice Cube, can I sleep with you tonight?" At this moment, in the King of England's residence, the black-clothed men were conducting a carpet search. Higashio Motetsu had just landed by the study's window when two shadow guards dropped down from the beam and waved their swords at him. Higashio Motetsu didn't expect that even if Xiaosu had taken away the elites, there would still be such powerful shadow guards in his residence. However, he was already prepared. He pulled out the folding fan at his waist and lightly blocked one of the shadow guard's swords. He dodged sideways, and the other shadow guard's sword was also avoided. At this moment, Dongting Wangyu's eyes flashed with a hint of evilness. The folding fan that he used to block the blade suddenly opened. Coincidentally, the evening wind blew, and the powder on the folding fan flew towards the two shadow guards. The shadow guards couldn't dodge in time and were hit by the powder, falling to the ground. From the moment they landed to the end of the three people's fight, it was only a blink of an eye. A fight between experts was so fast. It didn't alarm anyone. Higashio Motetsu put away the folding fan and shook his head. This young lord doesn't like to use swords and knives the most. It affects my demeanor too much. Thus, he leaped over the two of them and leaped into the study through the window. There was no candlelight in the study. He could only distinguish the layout of the room through the bright moonlight. He walked to the desk and flipped through the documents on it. He looked carefully, and then turned to the bookshelf and flipped through the books one by one. He looked around to see if there were any hidden mechanisms or hidden corners. Although the fight just now was silent, it was inevitable that someone would pass by later and his heart would be exposed. So he still had to be nimble. But after searching for half a day, he found nothing. He couldn't help but squint. Could it be that it wasn't here? At this moment, he felt someone approaching. His eyes darkened, and he turned to put the things on the desk away. But when his fingers touched a wooden box, he paused. He was so focused on looking that he didn't notice what was inside. He only remembered that it was a stack of paper. So he opened it again and picked up the paper on top to read it under the moonlight. Loosely tied up in a precious bun, light makeup done. Green smoke and jade green fog cover light and graceful, fluttering and wandering. Meeting is like not meeting. How can excessive affection be like heartlessness? After the music and song, just waking up, deep in the courtyard under the moonlight, quiet. Poet Sima Guang? It was signed by Chu Qingyan. Higashio Motetsu felt that this poem was well written. But who was Sima Guang? Why hadn't he heard of this person? But these words were really not flattering. He thought of that little face on the tree that was a little depressed after being teased by him, and couldn't help but chuckle. At this moment, the sound of footsteps approached. He restrained his expression and stuffed the poem into his sleeve. With a leap he left the study. He flashed out of the courtyard and heard a clamor. They must have discovered the two shadow guards. Higashio Motetsu chuckled. He felt the pleasure of doing something bad. His figure flitted about in the mansion and soon left the mansion. Finally, he stood outside the wall and the men in black had returned. The leader of the men in black stepped forward and said, "Reporting to young palace master, we have searched the King of England's residence and didn't find that thing. We suspect that this thing isn't in the King of England's residence." Higashio Motetsu lazily leaned against the tree. He tapped the folding fan in his palm and said softly, "Could it have been taken away by Xiao? We think it's very possible." The leader of the men in black responded. Higashio Motetsu sighed softly and pretended to be troubled. This is really troublesome. What this young master hates the most is running around. All the men in black were speechless. But in order to get the thing back, this young master has to make a trip personally. "Young master, if you want to go sightseeing, just say so. We won't say anything. I heard that Xiao and the rest are going to mine. The little girl is also there. TSK. It's so novel just thinking about it." Young master novel? He had a bad premonition. Let's go mine together. They were already used to this kind of young master. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.